Welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today we're going to go ahead and conquer this cottage design. Now, there's a couple of things that are a little bit different with this one. We have 3 palettes today, the largest amount of colors that I've used before, but that just gives us lots of variations in all the different color tones. As always, there is the canvas size. I've provided a stencil guide as well because a lot of this is not dependent on drawing the actual cottage. It's more about the details and the style and the aesthetic to this whole piece. This one does take a little bit longer. There is a natural break point in the middle of the tutorial as well. So take your time with it, enjoy the process, and hopefully you can tackle something like this. It is a lot easier than it actually looks, if I'm honest. So again, take your time, enjoy it, trust the process, of course, from start to finish. If you didn't already know, I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month over on my Patreon, exclusively to Patreon supporters. So make sure to hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And let's get started. So you'll be able to see from my canvas that I've introduced the canvas guide for today. So we've got our little stencil guide there. To do that, just download the PNG, go up to your actions and go to the option of add and insert it from your photos or your files, depending on where you saved it to. And then you'll be able to see in my layers, all I've done is renamed it guide there at the top. So to get started, let's go ahead and start to introduce all the basic shapes for all of these areas, and then we'll just build on them individually one after the other. So we'll create a new layer, we'll go ahead and drag it underneath the guide. We're going to go ahead and change our background color. Now, of course, you'll also know from the introduction that there are 3 different palettes for today's design. I'll let you know when we switch in between one, but you can see they're named Cottage P1, P2, and P3. We're going to go into Cottage P1. We're going to grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette, this kind of yellowy tone, and then you can go ahead and hit done. And then on the empty layer here, we're just going to go up to our palette. We're going to get to this view here, and we're going to grab the middle color in the far right column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. Let's set it to something maybe around about 30%. Top right wants to be nice and blue, and we're blending across until we get to like this point here where we want to leave yellow, and we want that to blend in towards like a highlight point over here on the left hand side. Now I've done it on a separate layer because you can always go ahead and grab your eraser, the soft airbrush as well, and go around in a circular motion down here just to really, make sure that that gradient is nicely there. So you can play with that later on as well. So that's our background done. We can go ahead and let's go create a new layer. We're going to introduce a few different elements that sit in the background. So over here on the left hand side, you can see we've got a couple of different lines. Now I'm going to quickly just tap on my guide and bring that opacity down. I don't need it quite strong, but you can leave yours as strong as you like. Now on this new empty layer, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here, the middle of the 3rd column from the right. Let's go to our brush. Let's change it to something a little bit harder. We're going to go medium brush now. We're going to make sure its maximum opacity size can be something around about, say, 3%. Now, this color here goes round here and up because it's actually this hill here. So what we want to do is we want to block this all in here. We can go along this line, introduce wobbles and tremors because it's hills right in the distance. So you can introduce some bumps and lumps in there. So believe it or not, that's your first hill. We then create another new layer. Now, let's drag this layer underneath this one that we just created, and let's go ahead and create a couple more as well. I believe in total we need 5, so let's go back to there, create one more new layer. So we've got the one that we just created and 4 new empty layers, and let's swipe from left to right on all 5 of them, group them together, and we'll just call this hills. They're not going to be very detailed at all, they're way in the distance, we're not interested. So let's then go ahead and go to the bottom layer out of the 5 of them. Let's go to our colors and switch to the final color, which is this one here, top of the 2nd column from the right. I am going to bring my brush size down to something a bit smaller, and I'm going along this line here, up over to the edge over here, trying to make sure the shape's a little bit sharper, and then I can bring my brush size up to say 3% and fill in the gap. And make sure you go in behind the house and make sure it's nice and full, no empty gaps. You can introduce some new bumps and lumps if you wish. Again, it's just hills way in the distance that we're not quite interested in. Now what I've done is I've gone from our nearest to our furthest shape. So now we've got 3 more colors that we need to introduce in the gap between here. So let's go ahead then and go up a layer. Let's then go to our colors. Let's grab the middle of the 2nd column from the right. And we want to create another new hillside that's going to come in, say down here. You can make it nice and random and then fill in the underside of it. So now you've got one hill now at the very far back level, and then a new hill here that sits in front. We can then go to our layers, go up a layer. We go to our colors. we go ahead and grab then the bottom color in that second column from the right. And again, we introduce a new hill. Maybe this one just drops right down into like a valley here. Again, it's way in the distance, we're not interested. You can even go over the front here, if you wish, of some of the far hills. So I've gone in front there of the previous one. Again, make sure you just fill in all the way down to the bottom. And then again, let's go up a layer one more time. Go to your colors, grab the bottom of the third column now from the right, and we introduce another one. This one's got a very, very subtle variation in the color. You won't be able to see it too much. So there you go, we've got some rolling hills in the distance. Again, we're not quite interested in that area over there. Let's move to a new area. Now it's up to you. You can go ahead and tap on this and flatten it. We are very much done with that, so we shouldn't need to change it later on. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer. Let's create another new layer as well. Swipe from left to right, and let's group this together. And let's rename it. Let's call it Top Tree, because we're going to introduce the tree that sits right up here in the top left corner. So let's grab the top layer out of the two. Let's go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here. It is the middle of the fifth column there. Your brush wants to be set to, let's go to inking and the dry ink brush. I love this brush. Let's set the size to about 10%. Let's zoom in, and you can see there's a couple of sort of guidelines here for some branches. We're just going to run in from here and go all the way out like so. You can make sure that's nice and full. You don't want to leave too much texture to hang around. And we're not quite interested in creating sort of large trees. You can see also I've left a gap there because I'm going to put some foliage in between there, and then the branch just disappears into the tree. We'll introduce another one though that comes in from this side and up like so. And let's just make sure it's nice and full, leaving a little bit of texture, but just a little bit of grain here and there will look quite nice. So there we go. We'll introduce our branches. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and tap on this layer. Let's just alpha lock it, keep it nice and simple. Let's then go to our colors and grab the top color in the fifth column. We'll zoom in, and we're going to introduce some lighting along the branch here, just a little bit on the top side, a little bit to there, and then maybe I think the lighting would just start to end. Now our light source, yes, it's back there somewhere, but the whole scene is going to somewhat be lit from over on the left hand side. So we're going to try and sort of factor that in. I'm going to add in a little bit of brown onto there along this branch, like it's getting some sunlight coming through. We'll leave the top ones up here because I don't want necessarily any lighting on them, because I think that the tree would block it all. So once you're done, we can then go down to the next layer down. We can go to our colors, and we can start adding in some of the dark tones. So let's go to the middle color here in the sixth column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of artistic and the Aurora brush. We want it fairly large to start with, about sort of maybe 10%. And just to triple check, I'm going to swipe my Aurora to the left and reset it just to make sure it's completely normal as it should be. So I'm going to set the size to around about, let's go to about 8 or 9%. It's pressure sensitive anyway, so you can press a bit firmer if you want. And we're just going to draw in some random areas of foliage. Now these are the largest leaves. You know, they will get smaller in a moment when we introduce the other tones. So these are just the darkest tones. I urge you to try and leave gaps in between as well. So here we can sort of plan it out a little bit. You know, we can have it a little bit more like this. Lovely. Now we've got some extra little patches coming through, and then you can press really lightly and slowly and you'll get some smaller areas that we can introduce. And all in all, that's pretty good. I don't think we need to go any more than that because we've got multiple colors to introduce. So let's go to our next color, which is going to be the bottom of the sixth column there. We're going to make our brush size a little bit smaller, down to about 5% now. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to add some edge highlighting on here. So we're going around the edge of the tree here, adding in this new tone of blue. And then we want to go round our little gap there in the tree. Anywhere that's got a hole, you can just add some of this smaller, more vibrant green, and along the edge. So you can add some along these edges because the lighting's wrapping around from the opposite side. We can add some lighter green in there, around, again, any of your little gaps that you created. And we can maybe fill that one in just a tiny bit with a couple of taps, a little bit more green under there. And then let's go to our colors once again. And we're going to go ahead and grab the color at the bottom of the fifth column, like so. And then let's set the brush size a little bit smaller again, maybe down to 4% now. And again, you want to go around these edges. You want to be going around, adding in some brighter tone in here. Don't be afraid to sort of add it again where your gaps are in your tree, just to show that that lighting is coming through. A couple of taps, drags, whatever you want to do. Tapping and dragging, that's going to be a common sort of trait for today's design. And we'll add in a little bit more on the underside. Now at this particular point, I'm also going to make sure I leave the top left. I don't want to add in too much sort of tone up there. I want to leave it a little bit empty. And then you can always go ahead and grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and go to artistic. Use the same brush, the Aurora brush, and make sure the opacity is set to high, the size around 5%, and maybe you want to kind of chop away into certain areas, make some random sort of eroded kind of shapes in there. But what it does is it just breaks down the tree a little bit more, gives you a bit more of that grainy effect on the edge in case you've made your shape a little bit too solid, as like I have. So that just breaks down that big solid shape that we created and creates a little bit more of a petal-like shape on the end, or small leaves on the ends. Now the next step is to block in our cottage. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. Top tree, you can collapse that down, save a layer if you want by tapping on it and flattening it. Let's then go ahead and create a couple new layers, swipe from left to right and group them together. And of course we'll call this cottage. Now we're going to get a lot of the basic shapes in here, so we can then flush out our cottage, but we are then going to move on to the plants and the path before we come back to the cottage. So we're going to go to the bottom layer out of the two. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here in the top left. Now, if you're struggling to see this, which I might actually be able to not see as well, let's just quickly go to our brush and go to calligraphy and monoline brush. Now, if we draw that against the background, yeah, you can't really see it. So let's just quickly double tap at the bottom of the disc to select black, temporary color. We're going to zoom in and we're just going to outline our cottage. So we're going to come down here. Your walls don't necessarily need to be nice and straight. Now, you don't need to do that whole line because we're going to separate the roof in a second. We're going to come down here, along here. We've got the thatched roof. We're going to come round into there. And we're just creating the general outline of our cottage. So you can see that's why I'm letting lines kind of run into each other, because we're not too interested. We're going to make sure though we get the chimney in here as well. So we're going to draw in those straight lines there. You can draw like lines by holding your pen down if you wish. That's totally up to you. At the top here, you can pick and choose what kind of design of your little chimney here that you want to do. Something like that will be fine. And then let's run this one all the way down to the edge. In fact, I'll redo that one. I want it to swoop down a little bit more. Perfect. There we go. And then we just need to ignore the rest of the lines on the inside. We can come in from around about here. We can then go along. Now we want to sort of come in to around about here, and let's bring in that line. We're going to go along here. We don't want to get too close to the path is what I'm thinking. So we want to cover that up in a moment with green anyway. So I'm just going to come around and through here. So just take a look at this and try it and match up accordingly. And when you're done, just drag and drop the color in. Make sure you drag it into the other smaller little spots as well. And you've got the silhouette of your cottage. Let's then go ahead and drag in the correct color, which was the color here in the top left of the palette. So we'll drag that in. We'll then go ahead and go to our layer above. We're going to go ahead and temporarily, we're going to tap on it and clipping mask it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here, bottom of the second column. Going to go ahead and draw in the cottage roof. So what that's going to do is that's going to come along here. Let me set my brush size a bit bigger. Don't need to have it quite so small. It doesn't really matter what size, just whatever's best for you. We're going to go along here. You can do it in one movement if you can manage it, or you can just let go like I have. There we go. And taking a look at that, that's a good line. So then we're going to run it up here. Now we want to just make sure we can see these lines just going up the edge here just for a moment. In fact, I'll set the brush size even larger so I can make sure I fill that in correctly. We're going around the top edge because in a minute we're going to get rid of a few of the shapes that we need to reintroduce, much like this chimney. Now at this point what we could do is just draw down here. We can then go down, we can go along, and then we can go back up the side, and then we can go ahead and go all the way down this edge, all the way to the edge. So now I've created a loop that goes edge to edge. I can drag and drop the color in. But as I mentioned, we want to get rid of a few shapes. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and tap on the shape below, which is the overall shape of the cottage. We're going to tap on it and we're going to select it. It's really important that color fill is grayed out like this. You don't want it blue. And then we can go ahead and we can go to the layer above. We can tap on it and we're going to add a mask to it. Now what I've done here is I want this layer to be separate. I don't want it to be clipped, but I also want it to fit within the correct shape. So I've basically added the shape of the overall cottage to this layer as a mask. So it now has a mask that just keeps things nice and tidy, but I can now tap on this and unclip it, and it still remains with this sort of clipped style effect. Now what that will allow us to do is if we go to the layer mask here, so making sure you're on the mask, your color needs to be set to black at the bottom of the disk. We can go ahead and bring our brush size down to something a little bit smaller. And we're going to go ahead and draw in shapes that we want to bring back out the white kind of stony effect. So we're going to bring in this line here. We're going to go along here underneath the window. And we've got this big, beautiful overhang, which we can then bring in. So let's go down into here. Drag and drop black into here. And you're basically erasing things that you want to hide. So you can see we've got a big black triangle here now, which hides this area of the design, allowing us to see through it. Now, one thing I want you to do is just drag these lines down a little bit further like this, then switch your color to white, because what white does is then white reveals the layer again, and you can just chop across here. So you get a nice sharp point on the end. You may need to do it at the top. That looks okay. This one here, I don't need to extend it because I've already got a little bit of extra, so I can just quickly just kind of sharpen that up a little bit in the corner. Now I'll switch back to black so I can start erasing again. The other shape that we want to erase is inside the window here. So we're just going to temporarily just go down here underneath our window, down here, and then across like so. We'll drag black into there. That hides that area nicely. And that is all of the roof done. So we're done with the two shapes there that we needed for both the top and bottom. Now, at this point, we're going to introduce some very basic additional shapes to the cottage. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to introduce them. Now, they will sit on top of the roof layer. So you're going to have to be a bit tidy with that factor. So we've created a new layer. Go into our colors and we're grabbing this color here, top of the second column. We're going to go ahead and add in some features. So I'm going to have the brush size set to something a bit small, probably around about 4%. I'm going to draw in a beam here that's going to come down here. I want this wooden beam of the exterior of the cottage to be a little bit chunkier here in this space. You can see I'm going up to the edge there of the yellow. So what you might need to do is then switch your eraser to the calligraphy option of say the monoline brush. Bring that to something nice and small and just follow your line and just tidy up. So sometimes you can't hide things under layers because of how I need things to be structured for this tutorial. So, at this instance, we're going to have to draw on top, and that's fine. It's just another test, another sort of measure to work against. And while we're here, let's also introduce an additional line. Let's maybe just drag one off to here as well. I'm kind of doing this one on the fly. It's not part of the stencil guide, as you can see, but I think that would look quite nice like that. Just into a central point. Try not to get too chunky with them. And then I will just try and make this one a tiny bit chunkier as well, coming down the middle. And again, I'll just grab my eraser and just triple check that it sits as it should under there. Lovely. Oh, that's nice. We've got some nice wooden features there. Another wooden feature is going to be the sill that sits underneath the window, the little ledge. So we're going to come across here, along, creating a rectangular shape, nice and simple. Drag and drop your colour in like so. Let's move across to the other window. This one is also going to have a sill. Now we want this one to sit in front of the white and on top of the thatched roof, just because how we want it to layer, and we can utilize when we do and do not want that kind of feature. So this one sits right on the roof and the roof tucks right up underneath there. Another couple of features that we want to introduce, the door and some additional wooden areas down here too. So the door, we're going to just draw in a straight line up. I will pop my finger on the screen just to get a nice straight line. It's quite a long line, so we want it to be nice and straight. And then once you get to this point, we can just create a bit of a curve over the top, hold your pen down, and then you can go ahead and get an arc. And if you need to, you can tap up here to edit the arc and just drag the points in to make sure they nicely run into our door frame. And we can tap away when we're done. Now just make sure that you go along the bottom here into where this bush will be and drag and drop the colour in. Then we're going to go ahead and introduce some wooden beams that are going to sit here. Now you'll also notice I'm going to run them down, but only to around about here because they're going to be hidden shortly underneath our bushes. So I'm just going to create a little bit of a wooden feature there. Another one here, another lovely wooden piece of structure. And then go into there too. Lovely. Let's then introduce another one. This is going to go down the corner of the building. So you can let that run down a little bit longer because we've got a couple of features that are going to be there, but they're not going to cover up the entirety of this beam. So I'm just going to connect them at the bottom, drag and drop the color in. Hopefully you can see my guide enough that you can then just make sure you're adding them in alongside. You've got all of the details there on the guide as well. And we'll introduce another beam as well, just coming across here. You can see I'm also somewhat freehanding it by not drawing in straight lines. I don't really want any straight lines too much. I want it that cottage feel. I want that warped kind of aesthetic to it. The window down here, far left hand side of the cottage, another little sill that's going to sit underneath here. We can then drag and drop the color in. Now this one here is going to get covered up by a bunch of flowers anyway, but I'm going to draw it in just in case it peeks through, so we can drag and drop the color into that space. And that's a lot of our wooden sort of features done. If you want to, you could introduce a wooden beam maybe right down the edge. I'd keep it really skinny though, as if it's kind of wrapping round onto the opposite side. So almost like the corners of the buildings always have sort of vertical lines in this instance. And then with that said, let's go ahead and just introduce like a corner piece as well. And I'll just grab my eraser and just tidy up the top. There we go. That gives it a lovely little aesthetic. Now we're going to get some more basic shapes in here. We're going to go ahead and introduce some of the window frames. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath your brown dark layer. So we're going to go underneath. We're then going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to draw in some of those tones. So we're going to grab the middle color here, the middle of the fourth column. We're going to go ahead and set our brush size to something around about, say, 3%. We've got a couple of windows to draw in, so we're going to go ahead and go up to the top here. We're going to draw in some frames, so we're going to bring in a nice straight line here, in behind the wooden sill there, which is going to look nice and tidy. We're then going to draw in a vertical line. Now, a couple of these window frames, you might want to start to introduce straight lines, you know, holding your pen down, drawing in some straight lines. Otherwise, window frames wouldn't look quite as, you know, wonky or anything like that. So you just want to try and occasionally introduce a couple of straight lines here and there. You can see I've done quite a few there, and just linking that up, that's fine. I don't mind that being hidden like that. I can drag and drop the color into all of those areas. Let's make sure we do that and just go continue filling it up. And then let's go ahead and draw in the actual middle, sort of middle frame. So this window splits into two, so we'll draw a line straight down the middle. And then it's up to you. You could probably bring your brush size down to something, say like a 1%, or maybe even a small monoline size, the smallest you can get there. And let's draw in some lines across. So if you don't get a small enough size, almost like I have, we can just go ahead and just thicken up the middle one in a second. So we'll draw that one in like so. So we've got two lines like that. Let's thicken up the middle bit here. A little bit of an extra straighter line there, just to try and separate it from the sort of two individual windows. And then the windows themselves, we're going to draw in some straight lines again, just to get some lovely little iron sort of glass framing in here. Lovely. And let's draw that one in as well. Your gaps don't have to be even. You can see mine are a little bit top heavy. I'm not really fussed about that. That's pretty cool. And then we're going to move over to this window. So once you're done with that one, we'll move over to this little one over here. Now this one, we're going to go ahead and remember that we are in front of the yellow. So what you draw here now will sit in front. So the first thing we want to go ahead and do is just draw in a straight line straight down the middle. We'll hold our pen down just so we can get a nice straight line. And then we're going to go ahead and draw in a straight line here on the edges. So there, up to there. And then once you've got those shapes in, we can then go ahead and just draw in the frame that's going to go all the way up. It's a lovely curved window, this one. Now that one might be a little bit too uneven. And you can see I've just slightly overlapped the yellow because I want to be in control of where this goes. So I'm going to hold down until it's an arc. I'm going to edit the arc, and then I'm just going to adjust this and just be in full control and just decide where I want that line to go. I want it to sit so it's nice and rounded like that. Tap away. So it eats into the yellow, but that's perfectly fine. Now on the outer edges, just like we did before, we're going to thicken this up, but we're also going to sort of try and factor in a little bit of perspective here as well, and how the roof would sort of hide this edge over here. So this left hand side is going to get a little bit thicker like so. Then we'll go ahead and where it starts to go sort of arc to arc either side, we'll draw in a straight line across here, and then we'll draw in two more as well. So you just want to sort of eyeball it really. A couple of lines in across, holding your pen down as you go. And then it's up to you. You can make this window a little bit more fancy if you want to, add in those sort of lovely sort of quarter style lines here that just break the window down a bit more. And you've got yourself a lovely little window frame. We've got 2 more to do. We're not going to introduce one on the side here. I want that just to be hidden in the shadows. So we're going to go ahead and draw in a line here up. And this one just needs to go a little bit higher than the guide, I would say. So we're going to draw in another line here. We're going to let that go up. Again, remembering that we are in front of the yellow. So what we draw in here, we will have to erase. So let's just draw in our actual window as we want it. And then we can just erase from there. So I've gone into the yellow a tiny bit. You can see I'm a little bit higher than the frame, and that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and grab my eraser. I'm just going to erase all the bit that goes into the yellow. And let's redo that one. I got a little bit too carried away there. And I've done it again, but that's fine. I can just switch back to my brush and just maybe bring that down. You know what, actually, when you zoom out, you don't want to get lost in it, do we? Let's just leave it as it is. Let's just go ahead though and try and widen up the edge of the frame as well. So it's just the same as above. So we've got some nice wide frames here. So we can just widen that up. We can go ahead. I'll probably have to draw this in again, and you probably will too. So let's draw in just to thicken up the top area, and then again, just grab your eraser. Just tidy up a little bit like so. Let's then draw in the rest of the actual window. We're just going to make this a really, really big window. So we're just going to draw in a line down the middle, like so. And then we're going to draw in just 2 horizontal lines. Now we want these lines to be nice and parallel to our frame as well. So we're just trying to make sure that they sit at the right angle. You may want to zoom out just to triple check. That looks pretty good to me. I will leave that as it is. We then have this window here. We're going to go ahead again, draw in a straight line. Another straight line here, a little bit wider than the guide, I'm going to say. Probably a little bit wider. I'm going to thicken it up, making the frame nice and thick. And then we'll go ahead and draw in our center column. And again, we'll draw in some horizontal lines here. So let's draw in this one here. Lovely. Let's zoom out. Awesome. Got our windows, got lots of our main sort of structure and features of our cottage. And the only other thing we want to do is just fill in the sort of behind of the window. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath your frames. So it's up to you actually. Let's just go ahead and rename this layer here that we just created. Let's call it glass. Let's rename the one above. We'll call it frames. And let's rename this one here and we'll just call it wood. So that way we know exactly what we're referring to and we're all referring to the same thing. So we're going to go to this glass layer. We're going to go to our colors for it. We're going to go ahead and grab the top color in the 4th column. Now we're going to go ahead and tap away and we're going to draw it in. We could use the reference tool, but just like me, I would imagine that you've left the bottom area of your window probably, you know, you've not drawn in a horizontal line there like I have. So we're going to go ahead and just draw in a rectangle inside and drag and drop the color in. So that's all we need to do. We just need to go down the edges, draw it all in one line if you wish, go up, and we'll go underneath there, drag and drop the color in. Let's go up to our window up here. This one should be nice and quick and easy. Big curve at the top, then across the bottom, and drag and drop the color in. Big window at the top. Let's go down here, let's go along here, let's go up and around, and drag and drop the color in. I actually really like how wonky this looks. The only thing I'm going to quickly just touch up is if I go to my wood layer, I'll just keep this in for a moment. I'm just going to go ahead and just extend this out just a tiny bit. It doesn't quite make logistical sense, so that's a little bit tidier. Now, believe it or not, we're actually done with our cottage. We're going to leave it. We're going to come back to it once we've added in the rest of the elements, because a lot of elements cover up the actual cottage, so we don't want to add detail in areas it's not really necessary. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to start to work on 2 trees that need to sit in the background. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab the top color here in the 3rd column from the right. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to go to the Aurora brush. Now we are going to tap on the brush. We're going to go ahead and go to its color dynamics, and we're going to bring its hue all the way down. I'm going to bring it down to around about 3% and its saturation too down to around about 3. Likewise, the lightness as well. I don't really want any variation in it. All of these, what happens here is it's adding in variation every time we draw. I only want a little bit of that. I don't want necessarily the colors to change beyond what we've added in. So I'm going to hit the option of done. We're going to come back to it. Now, later on, when you finish today's tutorial, it's really important that you swipe to the left and reset your brush. That will change it back to normal and you're good to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom up in here in the top right area. We're going to make sure we go to our layers and we create a new layer, and we want it underneath our cottage group here. So just create a new layer, collapse your cottage layer down. And this layer here, we're going to go ahead and Go right up here. With the brush size set to around about 9%, I'm just going to add in a bit of a tree up here, just a basic shape, nothing too fancy here. And also, we're going to go ahead and add in another one down here. So just in behind our cottage, and this one's just going to run up to around about here. That's pretty good. And then we don't want to come too low down, so we can just leave that like so. Now we're using that shape then to go ahead and then add further color too. So we'll go ahead and grab this color here. It is the top of the fourth column from the right. That brush wants to come right down now. We want to come down to around about 5% probably. And we just want to go ahead and add in rounded kind of shapes here and there, just to kind of show area of this tree area here that's getting some highlight. And it needs to just be as simple as that. You see I've added in an area here. I'm laying the blueprint for later on, and then I can add color on top of this in a moment. Let's move across. Let's do the same over here. A little bit of brighter tone on the top edge, because the lighting of course would nicely land on here. I'm going to come across. I've left gaps in there where the shadows can show. We can introduce a little bit here. Now don't forget, this isn't our final color tone, so this isn't our final highlight. So what you're doing now is you can add it in more areas, but it's kind of like a mid-tone that we can try and add in. Then we can go ahead and go to our colors. We can grab the middle of the fourth column from the right. Let's just set that brush size a little bit smaller, down to 3%. Zooming in on the top right. We're going to just pick and choose where we want to dash in some more of the brighter tone. So you've got that mid-tone set underneath. You can go right up to the edges. You can go beyond your shape if you want to. If you want to just push just light tone up towards the top. Maybe a couple of specks over here as well. Lovely stuff. Oh, that's lovely. Let's move across. Let's go along here. And we'll add in some on top of our mid-tone. So you're just picking and choosing where you land on it. I urge you to do less. Less is always more with something like this. Your bushes and trees will always have big gaps in them. And that's just like the darkness of the bush. There we go. And then we've got more tones. We've actually got two more tones. So we've got a more green tone now, the bottom of that fourth column. We go back up into our tree and we do the same. Let's go ahead and go along the top edge. We pick where we want to dash it on a little bit more sparingly and a little bit more towards the top now compared to the previous tones. A couple of specks here and there. You can add a speck or two down here, for example, but try and focus it more towards this top edge. This is where the lighting's landing on our lovely little tree up here. Awesome. Moving across. Now here we're really going to focus it towards the top edge, leaving that bottom really nice and sort of dark like so. Adding in some specks and taps, letting the Aurora brush do all the work for you. Lovely stuff. And then we'll go ahead and switch our color to the top of the fifth column there from the right. Sorry, this one here, this yellow tone. And we're going to add in some really sparing amounts of yellow on the very top, like the sun's just kissing top of this bush over here. Lovely. Couple of little hues on there. Let's move across to this side. Again, couple of taps on the top edge, just where the lighting's just dancing onto our tree up here. Maybe a speck or two there. And that's all you should need there. Lovely. And we've got some nice greenery in the background, bringing everything a little bit closer towards us now. That frames everything nicely. Let's then introduce another bush, but it's going to sit in front of the cottage now. So we're going to go ahead and go in front of the cottage and create a new layer. Now, if you want to, go back to the previous layer and just rename it and call it bush and tree. This layer here above the cottage, we'll just rename it and call it bush. We'll go to our colors. We're going to introduce pretty much the same techniques. We're going to go ahead and grab a really dark tone though. We need a really dark tone to get us started. So I'm going to grab this blue here, the bottom of the fifth column from the right there. We're going to zoom in and we're going to introduce one just over here. So I'm going to set the brush size to around about sort of 6% just to get us started. We want to bring this in. It's going to come fairly close towards this kind of column here, but we're just going to bring in another little bush here. Come down to around about here. We don't need to come too low down with it, but just a little something back here, maybe a little bit higher as well over here, just to try and frame our cottage a bit more. There we go. Lovely. And then we'll go through the same sort of color tones again. We may skip a few, but we're going to grab the top of the third column from the right. We'll introduce some brighter tone on the top edges. So you're leaving the dark blue now to occupy the shadows for us. And then we can add in Lovely rounded shapes here. Don't go too low with this because I do imagine it's going to get covered up quite a lot by everything else that's going to sit in front. So we can just add a little bit on here. Let's go to our colors. Let's jump straight to this middle tone in the middle of the fourth column. Dance on some color here. Maybe bring the brush size down a tiny bit to like a 4 or 5%. A couple more dancing little areas of highlight on here. And maybe this one's not getting any sunlight, so maybe we don't have to add in the same level of the colors. You know, we can leave this one a little bit more blue, as if it's just hiding down here. So let's take a look. Maybe we can add the green at the bottom of the fourth column from the right, and just add in a tiny bit of green on some of the top edges, just to add in some variation to the bush. And that's it. And you see how leaving lots of empty space for darkness really makes it look more realistic. You add layers and structure to it. Awesome, so we've got another level of our design done. Let's then go to our layers and start to move into what's going to be the two beds on either side. So we're going to create a new layer. We are going to create another new layer. Let's go straight for it and swipe from left to right and group them together. And we're just going to rename this. We're going to call it plants. So we're going to call it plants. The bottom layer out of the two. Let's go to our colors. We're then going to go to our palettes. We're going to switch it for the first time to the option of, it's going to be this one here, Cottage P3. We're going to tap on it and set as default. That way when we go back to our disk, it then allows you to pick from just these colors. So we're going to grab this color here, top of the third column there. Your brush wants to be set to something like airbrushing and soft brush. Let's set the soft brush. Let's set the size a little bit smaller though. We want to make sure it's nice and tidy. And what we're going to do is we're going to go along this edge here. Now I'm pressing really, really firm because I do want a little bit of a soft edge, but I don't want it to be like that kind of vibe. You know, we want it to be fairly strong. So I'm going along there, and then we're going to go ahead and go along a top line that sits around about here in our guide. There we go. It's going to come down. I'm going to bring the brush size down to a 2% now, and I'm just going to wiggle my pen a little bit with some wobbles and jitters down here just to blend it into this corner here. There we go. And then we're going to set our brush size to 5% and just fill this in like so. Now this is a massive flower bed over here that just creates a nice little S shape or C shape even to our path. So we can just go ahead and add that color in there. Lovely stuff. We're also going to go ahead and do exactly the same over here. So we're going to go ahead and first of all do a nice big circular shape here, because this sits right in front of this column here. So I'm just going to wiggle my pen a few times. I'm then going to go ahead and bring this round the base of this bush here, which is now somewhat going to push it a bit further back in our design. Let's bring the brush size to about 4% and go over the top here, pushing that bush a little bit further back. And then let's go ahead and make this a little bit more solid down here, fill in this area. And let's go ahead and then go right down towards what will be some like an edge of the path, which can be made out of some stone. So let's go down here. Let's go round. Let's bring our brush size down to around about 2%. And we just need to go ahead and just make sure that this somewhat crosses over the front door. We've got other brushes that we're going to introduce texture with in a moment, but just for a minute, just a basic sort of shape for you. Let's wiggle our pen in there as well. And let's come along here like so. So we just want to bring the greenery all the way around to the front of the house. So that's what you should be aiming for at this particular point. Let's just quickly change our brush though to artistic. We're going to go to this hearts brush here. Size is going to want to be fairly small, around about 2%. And I just want you to run this brush along here, which will just give you a bit of an uneven edge to it. A little something like this. Press fairly firm as well, so you can get rid of that soft airbrush in some places. You don't need to get rid of it everywhere. Likewise, you could just run that a tiny bit along this edge here as well, but most definitely along the top edge. So let's go along here, wiggle in our pen along this top edge, just to break down the shape, make it a little bit more random, a little bit more realistic. Likewise, let's also go around this bush here, circular motion with my brush now, just to break down that soft airbrush, making it a lot more like a bush style shape. And we'll also do the same here as well, just in front. So just pushing that bush way further back. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the layer, we're going to tap on it, we're going to go ahead and alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. We're going to go to our colors and grab the top of the fourth column there. Sorry, my mind's all over the place. We're going to go to airbrushing, soft airbrush. Set the size to around about 20% and just lighten up the top edge. really easily, nothing too deep, nothing too sort of interesting right now. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our brushes. We're going to go back into Artistic and the Hearts brush. We're going to set this brush size to around about 12% to start with, and we are going to start to introduce random patches of color. So you can see, if we zoom in, look how much texture we get in here. We want to make sure in a minute, when we introduce the dark tone again, that we end up with lots of patchiness here. So we're trying to introduce random patches of light, color, etc. So let's switch back to the top of the third column and go over the top of your other hue. So I want you to really zigzag this all over the place, create lots of patches and randomness and variation. Switch the brush from a 12 down to like a 4 as well, and just bring the smaller areas of detail and patches. This is literally just a backdrop that sits underneath our flowers, so you don't need to stress about it too much. The general goal is to have a little bit of a lighter tone towards the top. I'm going to set the brush to 7% there just for a moment, but in general you can always go back over with your tones and keep going backwards and forwards. You know, literally just wiggle your pen up and down, wiggle your pen like so. Random patches in here. Then switch your brush back, or your color, sorry, to the top of the fourth column. Let's just keep going, like a couple of vertical lines here and there, just to show some, you know, maybe there's stems in here, random patchiness. And sometimes this is all you need sometimes, just to set yourself a backdrop and then layer flowers on top of, because all of this just kind of gives you that randomness that should sit underneath, that you can't see in the underside of all of these planted areas. I'm going to keep going backwards and forwards just a little bit. I want to just really kind of make sure there's no general big patchy areas too much, and you know, can I just tap a few times here and there just to break that down and introduce randomness to it, really random. Maybe bring the brush size down to the 4% mark, and can I, you know, literally wiggle my pen down like so, a couple of wiggles here and there. Some of these colours might be a little bit tricky to see on camera, I hope not, but hopefully you can get the gist for what we're trying to do. Lots of straight lines in there as well, just to kind of show stems, etc. as well. The only thing you also want to bear in mind is we are going to introduce some stone here as well. So we kind of want to just make sure that this doesn't get too bright down here. So just make sure you go down to the top of the third column and wiggle along this edge here, just to make sure it's nice and dark. Now once we've done that, we've got the sort of basic shapes for those. We can go ahead and go to our layer above. In fact, we've got an empty one, haven't we? We can go to that layer. We can go to our colors, and we can introduce a nice green bush that's going to sit over here in the top left. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this color here. First of all, the top of the third column again. We're going to go back to our brush Artistic and the Aurora one. Let's then go ahead and set our brush size to around about sort of 8%. Let's go up into this top area here. I want to just create like a dark bush like shape. Nothing too big. I don't want it to sort of impose in this area too much. I just want to kind of show that there's something else on this left hand side making its way into the scene. We'll then go to our colors. We'll grab a dark green here, top left of the palette. We'll bring that down to about 5% and just tap away on here in a similar fashion. This one's way in the shadows, so we don't need to add in too much detail on here, just like a little something like this. We can even go to our colors. We can maybe grab a slightly lighter green, maybe the middle of this third column from the right, and just a couple of tiny little taps here and there on the top edge. So just a little something like that, and then maybe the odd one a little bit further down. If anything, I've probably added in a little bit too much there, so I'm going to switch back to the top of the third column and break that down, introducing shadows to kind of structure and layer this bush shape. Then I can go back to the green if I want to as well, top of the first column, and then just bring in a little bit of that mid-tone. There we go, little more sort of depth to this whole design as well. So let's go ahead and introduce what will be like the stems of what all our flowers will sit on. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to drag it underneath our bush there that we created, so it's in front of our basic shapes. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go to this color here, top of the sixth column. We're going to go to our brush. Let's go to the option of inking and dry ink. Let's set the size to that 10% for a moment, and then down here, bottom left area to start with, we're just going to streak in lots and lots of stems. So lots and lots of these. Now, you don't need to sort of think about them too much. The only thing really is just as they get further away, they should get a little bit shorter, a little bit less of them as well, because we're going to cover up the majority with some flowers anyway. A couple of long ones here right at the front. will look nice, just sort of adding in some detail in the gaps. And you can again add a few that run a little bit further back, a little bit shorter. There we go. We've got a couple of colors to introduce here, so you can go ahead and move over to the right hand side first, introduce some over here too. Now these ones are right in front of us, so we're just going to imagine that these ones are fairly long. There's either areas of grassy plant styled, plants in here in this bed, or they are the stems of the flowers. It doesn't really matter too much, to be honest. We're just going to sort of bring a few of those further back down the edge there, just trying to show a little bit of perspective. Maybe a couple that sort of flick over and into the path here will look okay. Lovely. Let's switch our color to then the middle color in that same column, so the middle of the 6th column. We'll introduce some greener tones in here. A couple more flicks. So they're going to have a little bit more of a green hue to them, rather than that kind of light green, almost blue-like color. And then again, we move over to the opposite side again. So move back over here. We introduce some more in here, a couple of small ones in the distance. Honestly, don't really need to think about this too much. Just there, in case there's some gaps. It's just some nice filler content. And then a couple, maybe one that just sort of strays over a tiny bit, like so. That's cool. Maybe a couple that just run a little bit higher. Nice and short though, nothing too long in the sort of top area. Before we carry on any further, I want to get our path involved here as well. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer. I want you to grab the other 2 layers, swipe from left to right, and just move them above. So it should be bottom in this plants group for a moment. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this green here in the top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We are going to want to try and grab something fairly solid, to be honest. So let's go for something like the airbrushing and the medium brush. Maximum opacity, let's set the size to about 3%. We can go ahead and we can run underneath our bed here on the left. We can go underneath the one on the right too. We can go ahead and just run this along here. Now here's where I want to introduce a little bit of that soft airbrush aesthetic to it. So I want it to run all the way up towards here. It's going to run in behind and around. So it's just going to come around here. So I just want a little bit of a soft edge up here. That's why we've used this brush. Let's then drag and drop the color into here and just make sure there's no massive obvious gaps in here. Now the green is actually just in between all of the stone here. Let's add some variation to the color. So let's go to our brush again. Let's go to artistic and use that hearts brush again. Let's set the color to the middle of the first column and set the size to 12%. If we go back to the layer and we tap on it and we alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it, I want you to just run your pen left to right here, just adding in variation and probably a little bit more towards the rear and the top. So I say the top, back here and back in this area here. I'm going to go ahead and switch the color then to the bottom of that first column and then add in some much brighter yellow tone that's going to again run all the way up and round the corner and off the edge. I'm going to bring the size down to 8% here and now just try and sort of tap away in here, going across like so, and not getting too close to us at the front here. This is going to be shaded here. So I'm just going to introduce patches in there, then go to my colors and grab the dark tone again, top left of the palette. Let's bring that brush down to 4% and let's start to reintroduce some darker tones where it needs to be. So primarily over here on the left hand side, a little bit over on the right, sorry, as well. And then in the middle, we can have a couple of brighter tones. Let's just take them down a notch or two. There's going to be stone that sits on top of this anyway. It's just in case it shows through. So it's just like we've done with other areas. We're trying not to add work in areas too much that's going to get covered up. Next, let's go ahead and add in what is essentially the frame to the path because we've got stone that will sit on either side. So let's go to this left-hand side over here. We're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create a new layer in front of the path. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, top of the third column. Let's go to our brush and let's set the brush to something, I reckon, like something fairly solid. Let's go to calligraphy and just go to monoline. Let's set the brush to 2%. And we're going to go ahead and run a path that comes, or stony edge down here. Add in bumps and lumps if you can, just to make sure it's not perfect. And it runs around and underneath the bush. It's going to come along here as well. So you can just go underneath the bush and then drag and drop your color in. Now, obviously we can see at the minute that this sits underneath. So we're going to drag it in front of our sort of bed over here on the left hand side. So we're going to drag it in front. We're going to create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to it. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here. It is the middle of that third column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to a brush I've not used before up until today's design, which is inking and ink roll. Now it has a quirky head to it. You can see it's like got a bit of an angle to it. And we want to go ahead and we just want to drag a downward line here. So just a downward line. So each time you introduce a downward line there, I'm going to bring the size down to 5%. You're creating a brick. So I'm just going to go ahead and sort of introduce like line after line here. So line, downward line as well. So line, downward line. And of course the bricks want to get a little bit smaller as they make their way further back. So let's just keep it fairly simple now. Just a dash, a dash, a dash, and that's it. Really, really small. Just keep it untidy. It's not something that needs to be sort of too descriptive in a way. Let's then go to our colors and grab the bottom color in the third column there and just do a horizontal line over the top of that to create the top surface of the rock. There you go. Just a simple bit of stone that's just getting a little bit of light. Let's maybe keep that a little bit less sort of bright like so. So using this brush at different angles, etc., will hopefully give your stone like some nice variation in the lighting on it. I think it looks really cool. And then once you've added in sort of an effect like this, you can see how also, if I just quickly draw this in for you, you can see the edge of the line of the shape. That makes a big difference because now it makes sure that all of this is nice and tidy. I then want to go ahead and go back to the base color, top of the third column. Bring that brush size down to like 3% and just get into the top here and maybe just take away a little bit of lighting here and there, especially over here on the left hand side where maybe the bush is slightly overhanging and maybe you want to just draw a groove into some of those rocks. Maybe you want to get in there and actually separate them like I've just done there, like get in there, break that down. And not only on the top, do it on the sort of the bottom edge as well, go down this bottom edge here, add in some random, just attack it, random scrapes of color. Honestly, attack it. It will look great. These little lines that run through, no one's going to know that you just streaked this all the way across like this and just, it's going to look like rock. It's going to look like stone that has nice random, cuts in it. I'm just adding in some vertical lines in between what I can see is my shape. So look how simple it kind of looks. Blob, 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 streak, 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 and then we're just streaking through them now just to kind of break them up, isolate a few of the bricks. If you don't like this brush, by the way, please by all means use something else at this particular stage. I know it can be a little bit tricky, if I'm honest, to utilize. Just going to wiggle my pen along the bottom edge there just to break down some of those stones. And that's as simple as it is. If you zoom all the way out, you've got this beautiful little stone effect on the side of your path. Let's then go ahead and add in another set of stones over here. So what we'll do is, because we've got a layer that's essentially the border and then a layer of color and detail, let's do the same. So let's just use the same layer. So this one here, the shape that we created for this area. Let's go to our colors. This is going to utilize these green tones up here as well. It's going to be a little bit more green. It's going to be somewhat covered in the sun. So top left of the palette. Let's go back to our brush and change it though to calligraphy and the monoline brush, and a fairly small size of 2% there. Now I'm actually going to quickly just set my color to white here in the top left because it's a little bit tricky to see against the same color of the background. So I want you to be able to see what I'm drawing. So you can do the same if you wish, if it makes life a bit easier. Add in some bumpy, blocky shapes down here. Try and make them kind of angular and sharp, almost just like rock. And then we're going to come from around the front door there, all the way around, creating again that top edge. This one's a little bit straighter. It also nicely sits underneath all these grassy areas. I love that. And then drag and drop the color into the middle there. And you may need to just add in another one there, like so. Now, drag in the correct color though, if you've done the same as me, which is top left. Drag that into there. Let's then go ahead and go to our layers. Let's go up to the layer that is clipped to the shape here. So this is where we add our color again. We're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of the first column there, sorry. Your brush needs to be set to ink roll again. I've got it set to about 7%. I'm just going to do the same. I'm just going to go horizontal here, adding in some random shapes. Maybe these ones here at the front need to be a little bit larger, a little bit more close together. And then as we get further back, let's maybe think about bringing the brush size down to say 5% now, because these ones here are going to get even further back, obviously, aren't they, compared to the ones here. And then I'm just tapping and tapping and tapping and tapping and tapping along here, just to create that top surface of some of those rocks that go all the way along, all the way over to there. Now, that's as simple as it needs to be again. Just go to your colors now and grab the color in the bottom left of the palette. If the sun's coming across, I imagine it's going to sort of cascade onto the side of some of these rocks and onto the top. So I'm just going to add in like a lovely sort of yellow tone on some of those rocks. So like a bit of a vertical down line. So it goes all the way down towards the ground. And then a little bit on the top surface, a little bit along there too. Maybe bring the brush size down to like 3% and go along the top here. Just kind of adding in small details. Let's make the brush size a tiny bit bigger again. Introduce it a little bit more on some of these ones back here. These ones are a little bit more top down now, so we're just adding it to the top surface. And to be honest, that's probably a little bit too neat. So we'll go back to our color and grab the base color. This one here, top left of the palette. Bring that brush size down to 2%. Let's start chopping away into here, adding in breaks and lumps and bumps and horizontal breaks in here. We're just breaking up the top surface of the stone. I definitely want to get rid of the highlight on some of these areas here. Here, we'll definitely break these down. A couple of squiggles along here. That's all it needs to be. Chop down the edge here. Maybe even chop down the back area as well as it makes its way into the bush. A little bit of that dark green on the back area there. Like the bush overhangs it maybe. Like so. Now what I will do is I will add a tiny bit of this colour here, top of the third column. Where maybe we'll just introduce it in kind of some of the gaps maybe. Especially the ones a little bit closer towards us. And again on that rear area there of some of these stones. So just creating random blocks. Some of them may be that the blocks are touching. So they don't need to have like a separating line between them. But occasionally you might want to get in there and just introduce like a little bit of a darker patch, like so. And there you go, you've got some more stones running around the outside. I just think it's so beautiful when you see something so simple like that come together. And you can just keep it very, very simple. And the only thing I will do though is I will go back to let's grab the top of that column. First column, I just want to break down some of those highlights. There we go. Lovely. Just as they make their way towards the front door, they shouldn't get too much. Now we need to go ahead and add in the cobblestones. So we're going to go ahead and we will create a new layer. Let's drag it underneath the stones that we just created. So here in our layers, we're going to go to our colors. We've got this beautiful gray tone here, top of the second column there. Same brush. Let's go ahead and go horizontal here now and kind of add in row after row almost. Maybe a few like rows here where you have to create multiple dashes to add it in. So essentially we're going to be creating cobbled stones here in this path. So you can get in here and just paint in random blocks. And then as you make your way a little bit further back, you can just run the grey all the way around the back there. Now don't worry if it runs over the top of this bush, we'll tidy it up in a second. But that is where your stones will start to get a little bit more condensed and we can't see the breakage in between them. And run it right up against the edge of the bush as well. A little something like that. I'll grab my eraser. I'll go to the monoline brush. In fact, let's go to our eraser and grab the hearts brush. That'll look good. Hearts under artistic. Set that to 4%. Let's go round. Let's go round in a bit of a motion here just to get rid of some of those. There we go. Lovely. Awesome. So you've laid out a couple of foundations of some stones here. We can then go to our colors. We've got some lovely yellow tone in the middle of that second column. Your brush again wants to still be the ink roll, probably a 5% brush size now. We want to just sort of identify a few blocks here and just cascade some lighting onto them. So a couple of areas of yellow here, a couple of areas here maybe. Now we're going to define these blocks in a little bit, the actual cobbled stones, but just introducing areas of lighting. Maybe there's a tree, maybe this tree, and then these are the little gaps in between that the sunlight is just beaming through. You can also use this yellow now to kind of block in a few more areas if you wish. And obviously the path needs to start to sort of roll round. So you kind of need to go from this point outwards like this, at that kind of angle. So you can just kind of roll it round. But we are just going to merge all the colours together in a second. Let's then go ahead and go to our colours again. Let's grab the bottom now of the second column. And this is where, as I mentioned, we just merge it all together. So at the back here, I'm just going to run white pretty much all the way along here. The detail's getting compressed. We're not too interested back there. It's going to come round. It's going to layer on top. And it's going to come round to some of these areas down here. Maybe an occasional little area, like a couple of stones here and there maybe. But ultimately, you just run that colour all the way up there. Isn't it mad sometimes how you can just run a colour like so and it just does all the work for you because all the details are getting compressed further back. Again, let's go to our eraser using that hearts brush and just triple check that we just tidy up this area here with the path. And this is your path. Now, what we can do is we can go ahead and go to that layer. We can tap on it and add a mask to it. Making sure you're on the mask and your color is set to black. Your brush wants to be set to the option of dry ink. And I'll set the brush size to around 10%. Now, you can take your time with this, or you can do it as quick as you like. So what I mean is you can literally just run like a line like so, like a couple like this, and then just run some horizontal lines through it like this, getting gradually more tight as you make your way further back, and then they kind of disappear. And then you can get in here and just break them down and isolate them down. It's totally up to you how long you want to spend on these. What you can otherwise do is start, say, down here at the bottom, and we can go ahead and run this round and create a rounded shape here for a bit of stone. I can run here, try not to make them too perfect, just isolate these areas here. I do not want any perfect shapes here at all, in terms of I don't want any stones to be sort of in a perfect formation at all. I want some to be small and round, and then a couple to be nice and long and have a bit more of a rectangular shape to them. Let's bring that brush size probably down though to about 6% now. So you've done your real close ones, and then you just want to kind of run these across. You can just wiggle your pen, create a line if you wish, like this, all the way across, and then just create vertical lines in here. Sometimes they look fantastic because you create random like bumps and lumps that just create slabs that are a little bit higher. Look at this one. This one looks like it's got a big bump on the top of it. You can also then tidy up the edges as well. So you can just tidy up these areas here. We will definitely do that in a minute up here. Couple of areas like so. So we're just revealing a couple of the areas underneath. Zoom out, don't get lost in the details as always. Now this does need to somewhat stop once you get to this area here, because we don't want to kind of add in too much detail when the detail starts to fall off. So we're just going to make our lines progressively a little bit thinner here and there, and then making sure we introduce some random patterns in there too. You can also round off a sort of individual piece of stone if you want. So you can create like one like this where there's a big gap in between. That looks great to me. That just shows that real lovely randomness of like the cobbled streets. Lovely. Let's go around here and a little bit further up as well. Again, wiggle your pen, maybe create like a high bump out of nowhere. And that's, again, just one of the stones that's a definite trip hazard, but it's a little bit bigger. Let's maybe introduce a straight line off there on the right-hand side. And all the detail now should start to fall off. So what I mean is I'm going to draw in another horizontal line, but I'm going to leave gaps in between. And then I'm going to start to draw in some lines, but they don't all connect. They're all very different weights. They're all going to slowly start to just fall off in terms of detail. So we're going to keep going. We're going to tidy up a few of the edges where necessary. And we're just going to draw in some thin lines across. Maybe just do all your thin lines to start with and just leave gaps in between. Maybe even bring your brush size down. I've just realized I've made a big mistake there. So I can change my color to white and just draw that back in. That's the beautiful thing about a mask. If you make a big mistake, you can always fix it. Let's go back to black. And let's tidy up a few of these edges over here and just draw in line after line. Just a few detail lines. Look at these little scrapes here as the path starts to roll around, disappear out of view. We don't need to detail that. It's gone. It has gone. It has left our area. And then maybe a couple of vertical lines in here just to show a couple of the breaks of the stones. Just a couple, but as they make their way up and around, we lose all of that control. We have to let go sometimes with digital art, or in any art form really. You have to learn to let go sometimes, especially the stuff that is not necessary to add in. I'm just going to go around here, maybe just add in like a little indent here and there just to kind of break down this grey-like shape. Awesome. And you've got your lovely stony path. By all means, if you want to, you can start to smudge that all together if you wanted to. So you could go down to the layer below. You could just tap on it and alpha lock it so you can't ruin the shape in any way. And you can go to your smudge tool. Let's grab something like the airbrush and the medium brush. 2%, and maybe just smudge a few of those more solid lines at the back there together, breaking those down by just smudging. There we go. That's going to get rid of a few of those bold streaks. I want those bold streaks at the front, but at the back we kind of want to say no, There's nothing going on back there. You don't need to be looking back there for details or bold streaks. Just take my word for it. It's okay. So we end up with a beautiful little path there with some nice lighting on it as well. Now you can, at this point, if you want, again, because the layer is alpha locked, you can go to your colors and grab, say, the yellow tone or even the light tone at the bottom of the second column. Set your brush to, I think we need an airbrush. Let's go to medium brush and airbrushing. Set the size to something small like a 1% and maximum opacity, and zoom in, and then on some of these just maybe brighten up some of the edges of them. Maybe just add in like a little bit of a brighter spot on some of them, just to purposely add in a bit of lighting, maybe even a whole area here where there's a little bit more lighting coming through from the trees maybe. And you can likewise go ahead and go to your colors and grab, say, this color here, the middle of the third column, and just darken up a few of the right edges, just to add in a little bit of darkness and 3D kind of effect to some of the stones in here. So just random little scrapes on the right and bottom edge should give you that perspective and area of lighting enough that you can just kind of show that they're a bit more 3D in there, like so. A little bit on that underside, a little bit under here, just a couple with a little bit of additional content to them. Now the other thing we kind of want to also do is we want to go down a layer to our path again, to the green that sits underneath. We want to go ahead and introduce a bit of a shadow behind some of those. So I'm going to make sure I'm on this layer. I've got the same color still, the middle of the third column, the medium brush again, and I just want to kind of start to think about maybe darkening up underneath the right side and the bottom edge, because we don't want any of these super bright tones where the cobble of the ground here might actually cast a shadow. So for example, where we've got these yellow tones, we kind of just want to say, no, there is no lighting there. Don't worry about it. You can take it away and just erase from it, adding in a little bit of a shadow to some of those. So just taking a look, trying to see where I've got some yellow below some of those areas. You can leave it here on the top edge of the stone below, but the bottom edge of the stone, if there's any yellow running up to it, you kind of want to take that away now and just move it beyond that edge of that stone. Awesome. So we've got a lovely little cobbled pathway to our cottage. Now you've done with your pathway, we've got a lovely little path to our cottage. And at this point of the design, you are about an hour into it. So at this point, it's actually a really good time to take a break, because if you want to, you can do. We're going to be moving on to the flowers shortly. So this is probably a really good time to take a break and come back and join me for what will be the next part. So we are going to get started with our flowers. So we're going to go ahead and go to our plants group here. We want to go ahead and go right to the top of our plants and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this red here, bottom of the fourth column. Your brush wants to go back to artistic, Aurora, and we're going to make sure our brush size is set to around about 8% to start with. Over here, tap, 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 varying pressures. We're going to introduce some lovely, lovely big red flowers over here, all the way down to the bottom of the canvas. And we're going to create little sort of clusters of coloured flower all the way in these gardens here at the front of this cottage. So once we've got a little bit of red in here, a couple that run a little bit astray, we can go ahead and go to the layer, tap on it, alpha lock it. We can go to our colors and grab the red in the middle of the fourth column. And we can just then bring the brush size from 9 down to about 5, zoom in and just tap away on the top edge of some of your flowers here to add in variation and this lovely brighter tone to them. Create some rounded shapes if you wish, round off a few of your flowers. Obviously today's flowers are not, fully structured like a flower. We're going for that kind of loose painting kind of style to it. I don't really like drawing flowers too much, if I'm honest, in terms of actually drawing them in. So I want to go ahead and just use the Aurora brush to fill out the entirety of these gardens. So we've got some lovely red flowers there. Let's then go to our layers. Let's create a new layer and drag it underneath. We are going to create different groups and different layers for different colors. We're then going to go ahead and we're going to grab this tone here, top of the fifth column. Now previously our brush was about 9%, so we're going to go down to about 8, but 8 to 7, and just try to somewhat think about making our flowers a bit smaller. So let's actually make it about 6, sorry. So we're going to go ahead and add some lovely white flower in here. Make it run in the gaps between the red as well. It's almost like you can see through to the opposite side and the new patch that's coming in. So these lovely white flowers. Leave lots of gaps. And then as you get towards the bottom, maybe bring your brush size down to like a 4% and just tap down here to add in a few. Again, maybe just a few in the gaps. That's lovely. Now with this one, we will tap on it, we'll alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors. We've got two tones. We've got the green and the bottom tone. So we've got the green in the middle of the fifth column. Let's set the brush size to 5 or 6% and just literally tap away at random all over those flowers you just added in. We're trying to create random hues of color here. And then go to your colors, grab the white at the bottom, of the fifth column there. And we'll tap away, adding in some lovely bright spots here. You're going to see this technique over and over and over again with today's design. So we're just tapping away, adding in some lovely bright spots on there, just trying to give variation to our flowers. Let's move back a set of colors now. So we'll go ahead and create a new layer, drag it underneath the white ones. We'll go to our colors. Our next set of oranges that we add are really nice and bright. So we've got this one here, bottom of the fourth column from the right. Brush size probably wants to be around about 3 or 4% now. And we're going to make sure we try to keep our pressure nice and light so that they don't get too big. But we're creating a lovely, big, rounded, orangey bush here as well at the front, full of beautiful flowers. Now I do love a flowery kind of design, but again, just drawing in the flowers themselves, sometimes, one, it's not necessary at times, and two, it's really time consuming. We've still got a whole cottage to be drawing in, whereas now we can just lay out all of our flowers here and just fill out our garden nice and easy, and everybody gets the right impression from it. So I've just left a tiny bit on the front here because I want to introduce some of the other colors as well. So just like before, we go to the layer, we tap on it, we alpha lock it. We go to our colors and we grab the brighter tone, so the middle of the fourth column from the right, and we tap all over here now, but mainly towards the top edge, adding in some lovely yellowy tones to some of these oranges. So we're just adding in lovely variations. Yes, the Aurora brush could have done it before, but I wanted to decide what the color tones were myself. Let's go to our layers, create a new layer, drag it underneath the orange ones. We'll go to our colors and we will grab the pink here at the top of the fourth column from the right. Set that brush size down to about 3% now. Our flowers are getting very, very tiny. And we're going to bring in some pink. Now I'm imagining that the pink wraps all the way around that other side of this bed that I can't quite see all the way around. So I'm just going to bring in some pink towards the edge here onto the corner. Bring some flowers up and beyond that shape that we created, the base shape for this area. It just helps to break down that solidness to it. And a couple down towards the brick down here, like overlapping the brick, will look great. It kind of just hides it underneath the bush. Let's then bring some of these pink flowers all the way back here. Again, we're trying to get rid of that solid line here on the top. Really, really nice and light. These ones are meant to be nice and small. And also, by pressing lighter, you make them a little bit lighter in their color as well, meaning that you can definitely show that they're a little bit further away. Excellent. And let's maybe add in a couple over here. This area is going to be pretty much left. We're not going to add in any detail in there. And just like before, we go to the layer, we tap on it and alpha lock it. We go to our colors. We grab then the lighter pink, the top of the third column from the right, and we get in there and we add in some lovely brighter specks and whatnot to your flowers there. Adding in some like so. Now it's actually fine also to go to the layer, tap on it and turn off the alpha lock and just introduce the highlight tone, so the brighter tone on top if you want to. It's just sometimes most of us will draw it in how we want it first time, and by now adding in more you may end up actually adding in a little bit too much. So just bear that in mind a little bit. I'm going to add in a few bright patches back there, and look at that beautiful bed of flowers there on that left hand side. Now let's repeat a lot of what we've done here, but on the right side. I'm going to try and save you some layers, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the white layer to start with. We're going to tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab that same color, top of the fifth column. We're going to move our brush up to around about the 7% mark, and over here really close to us we're going to introduce some white flowers instead. So just varying up slightly to the opposite side. I don't want to add in too much, I want gaps in there. Let's then go to the layer, tap on it, let's alpha lock it. Let's go to our colors and we will grab then the middle color in that column of whitish tones, so the middle of the fifth column. Tapping away on here, just add in some yellow spots, and then go to the same color bottom of the fifth column there. Tapping away, adding in your lovely bright white patches on top of some of these flowers. Not all of them, but just enough of them. Let's then move back into some orange color again. So we'll go to the orange layer, we'll tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab the orange at the bottom of the fourth column from the right. And your brush wants to be set to around about 4 or 5% now. Just in behind here now, we're going to introduce really, really lovely, bright, fiery, almost orange tone. Again, leave gaps. Leave gaps, allow the green to have some space in there as well. And as you get further back, you can start to sort of think about making things a little bit more condensed. So you have to have a balance now, of course, between letting it sort of be condensed, but also letting it have gaps. It's a real balancing act. And once you've got to a level you're happy with, you can alpha lock it, it's up to you, or you can just go to the yellow, the middle of the fourth column from the right, and just add in some brighter yellowy spots in here. Maybe on top, maybe even a nice cluster here, maybe a little bit on there too. A couple of yellow specks on there, that'll look great. Let's then go to our colors. Let's go to the pink layer. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our layer. Make sure you tap on it and make sure it's un-alpha locked. But we're going to go to our colors, top of the fourth column from the right. And this pink here now, with a brush size of probably around about 3 or 2%, it's going to go all over this bush here. We're going to tap away multiple times. Leave gaps to start with, of course, but maybe make it nice and sort of dense down here where we go right in front of our front door. So we can add in a lovely big patch of the color down here. And to be honest, I could probably do with bringing that across a bit more, but maybe I'll make that an alteration later. Tapping away, adding in lovely pink flowers right down here at the bottom, overlapping some of your stonework as well, just to kind of blend everything together. Maybe a couple back here, but nothing too much, because maybe the sun is always over on this left hand side, so the flowers don't grow quite so much in the areas where there's no sunlight. So let's try and factor that in. Maybe a cluster here, definitely some over the top edge though. I want to again break down that shape a bit more. A couple on the back, but mainly on that left side. And I'll add in a few that make their way over towards the orange. Again, I'm going to go ahead and tap on it and alpha lock it this time. You don't have to do that, of course. You can add in the color as you wish. But I'm grabbing the top of the third column from the right, and I'm just going to randomly dance that all over my pink tones here, adding in some lovely variation, some brighter pinks in here, and leaving the right side a little bit more of those previous colors that we created. Now, before we carry on, I want to go ahead and go to my layers. We're going to go down to the layer. You'll be able to see them flashing here on the left hand side. That's got all of our kind of grassy blades on them. We are going to go ahead and make sure we're on that layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go to the color here, top of the sixth column. Brush again back to inking and the dry ink, and let's set the brush size to 3%. And let's get in here now and create some additional kind of grassy kind of blades in here. Not necessarily sort of stems of these flowers. I'm not really interested in that. I just want to create like grouping and clusters, all spiraling out from a central kind of point. So you can see here, I'm trying to sort of throw out a few lines here, almost like a bush or a different type of plant that's just growing underneath in the gap. And then maybe like a few stray lines that make their way a little bit further back. Then switch your color to, let's grab something a little bit brighter. Let's grab the middle here of the fifth column and just introduce some streaks in here. Keep it nice and light, don't add too many of these. That just run across in your gaps, just a couple of green little sort of specks here. You can just flow them all out from that central point, kind of chuck in a few lines up and out. Lovely. And then a couple more up and out like so. Awesome. Now we've got another little sort of bit of texture and detail happening in here too. Now we're going to zoom out a second because we are going to move on to this area in front of our cottage. So let's do exactly that. Let's move into this area here. So we're going to go to our layers and we need to introduce like a big dark bushy area there as well. So we're going to go ahead and for a moment, we're going to go ahead and let's put it at the back of our plants group. So we've got a big plants group at the minute. And then down here, just before where we get to our path, etc., we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. Now, if you want to, you can create another one. swipe from left to right on those and group them together. So it's a group within a group, but we can just call this front garden. We'll just call it front garden. Therefore, we know it's right in front of the house. So there we go. We're going to go to the bottom layer out of the two. We're going to go to our colors, but we are going to go to our palettes and we're going to change it to palette number 2 now. So we're going to tap on that and set as default. So Cottage P2. And we're going to go ahead and grab the color in the top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to change it to artistic and we're going to use, let's use the option of the hearts brush. Size set to 4% because we do need some finer kind of aesthetic to it. We're going to go round in a circular motion close towards the front door and then round up here. Big area here in front of that column. Lovely. In front of the window. Let's go around here. Big area here. You want to probably bring the brush size down to like a 2% and get right close down towards the ground here and just kind of go along that. You do need to go along the whole thing really just to make sure it touches correctly. You can end up with some little white gaps in there if you need to. So let's just carry on. We'll go along here. We'll go back up again, up towards the window. Along here too. Lovely. Bring the brush size down just a smidge, down to 2%. Just so I can get some finer areas of this texture and then just let that run all the way off to the left hand side. Off to the left. Lovely. I want to add in some bumps and lumps here that look a little bit more random. Now we are going to introduce also like a little bed here as well on the window sill. So I want to go ahead and try my best to keep the actual like sill there a little bit and just layer it on top. So you end up with this like block on top of it, like so. So you end up with a little bit of that brown underneath and maybe it just links up on the right hand side. I like that a lot. Maybe we'll introduce some other areas as well. We do also want to introduce like a hanging one as well. So like a circular motion here and then a bit of a drag down will look cool. A little something like this. We'll also introduce another one over here. And maybe this sort of makes its way down the column as well. Maybe it's like grown on there and then makes its way down the side. That looks pretty cool. A little something like that. And moving over to here, I just want to make sure that this area here has got good solid color. Just add that very close to the front door. Maybe a little bit of weight to that there. Lovely. Let's then go ahead and go to our colors. Let's go to the middle color in that first column. Set the brush back to 4%. And just like before, we're just going to layer on certain areas. So try and isolate big shapes here. This is your mid-tone. So you're starting to lay out the blueprint, the foundations of where you want everything. We'll go along the top edges of some of these. Along here. Good solid amount of green. It's very subtle to see on camera potentially as well. So just bear that in mind. 2%. A little bit along there. A little bit in the gaps, a couple of little splashes of colour here and there. A little bit towards the lower side, a little bit on that top edge, of course. We've got brighter tones to introduce, so you don't need to go too crazy with this. I will run a little bit like a wiggly line through the top area of this little, what's it going to be? Like a little bed on top of there. A couple on the back here, a couple of splashes of green. Some green in here too. Let's move across to this one as well. A little bit of green in there. Lovely. So you should end up with something like this. Let's then go to our colours. Next set of green. So the bottom of that first column. Lovely vibrant green this one. Starting to get into some more punchy colours. My brush size is set to 2% in case you're interested. Just trying to lay out some of these areas. Now to be honest, you kind of want to fluctuate really between a 4 and that 2 because you also want to have it nice and random, a little bit like the area down here we did. So I'm just going over some of those areas just with the larger 4% brush size just to see what lands. Go over the top of that one too. A couple of speckles. That one's got a lot of green. And then this one at the very far area here, about 2%. I'm just going to go down to that smaller size. Get a little bit more in control. A little bit on that top edge, a little bit down there too. Lovely. And I will add some speckles of this. Let's add some speckles. Let's go even smaller. Let's go down to like a 1% and just add some speckles of green. It's going to get covered up a little bit by flowers anyway, but just a little bit of green here and there will look nice. And of course in our additional little sort of wall mounted ones as well, literal squiggles. Look at that. Squiggles just down here, especially with the small brush size. Lovely. I really hope that like throughout this lesson you can really understand that sometimes you can just allude to the shape by just squiggles and dashes and splodges, etc. We'll go to this color here, top of the second column now. Brush size probably around about that 4 to 2% again. You know, a couple in these darker areas now with this more blue tone. You can drop them in the gaps, but don't be afraid to go over the top. You know, break down those larger shapes. Let's go down to the 2% and just see if we can introduce random patches in here. Maybe a little bit more towards that bottom edge, just towards the body basically of the bushes, etc. These are going to get some lovely flowers in here too, so we'll lose a little bit of these sort of blue and green tones later on. Lovely, really dense, a little bit on the rounded back side there and a little bit down here too. So let's do the same. Let's go down the rear of that one too. A couple in there. Let's go up a tiny bit. Let's go up to the 4% and just dash in some darker color there. Next color, nice and bright this one though, the middle of the second column. I am going to set the brush size to 2% because I want to be very sparing with this. I just want to kind of tap and dash it on in certain areas. Again, we've got flowers that will go on top, so we won't see too much of this, but it's just there just as a little additional bit of color. And let's in fact go to a 4% and just press really lightly. Press really lightly, you'll get some little light splodges of this and you won't be in too much control. I want to take the control away from you sometimes so that let the brush do the work. And let's set the brush size down to 2% and go along here, couple of dashes on the left side, maybe a couple of little spots of this nice green. And of course our little hanging ones as well, they can get a couple of green tones, maybe just a little bit down the bottom there on that side. Awesome, so you should end up with something like this. Now what we want to go ahead and do is introduce flowers as well as the blades of it as well. So we're going to go to the layer above. We're going to go ahead and add in some blades in here, and they're going to be quite bright greens. We're going to go for this column over here on the right hand side. So I'm going to go for the middle color in the 5th column. I'm going to go back to my brush and go to the option of inking and dry ink. 3% brush size, so it's nice and small. And we're going to go to town a little bit on introducing like these kind of blade-like plants. So from a central point, pick a spot that you can make your way higher as well if you want to, you know, like really give it some height and further the reach of some of these like blades in here. Couple then towards the underside in here. So this is just pre us adding in all the flowers. I just want to add in some good content down here towards the sort of the lower half of our little beds here. Couple back here again, all from like a central point will look great. You can of course add some a little bit higher, a little bit looser as well, in terms of they don't need to touch from that central point. They can just be a blade or two a little bit higher. Don't be afraid to make one like fairly large as well. I'm going to introduce another one down here too in this corner, because the side of the house is going to be getting a lot of light, so we can afford to use these brighter tones in here for these plants. So a couple of larger blades in there, that'll look great. And then just down here, maybe at the bottom, rather than like plants, you just introduce like almost like grass down here along the very bottom edge. Not all the time though, you know, you don't want it to all look the same. You want to have that nice randomness to it. There we go, a couple of blades in there. And let's maybe add in a few just up in the body here as well, just a couple up in there. Lovely. That looks pretty cool. Let's go then to our colors. Let's grab then the bottom color in that column of greens, so the bottom of the 5th column. What we do is we go back into these and we just introduce new tones in here. So a couple of maybe larger ones on this occasion. You don't have to do it everywhere. You can leave a bush, you can leave a whole plant, you know, like I can leave that one with just 3 or 4 strokes in there, and maybe I focus my attention more on this one over here instead. That gets a little bit more love. It varies up the lighting between them, makes life a little bit more interesting. Let's then go to the top color though. This is nice and bright now, top of that 5th column, and these are going to be your brightest spots, so you can introduce these in here, you know, really have fun with some really nice yellow tones in here. And these ones are just the ones that are catching the light the most. I'll add a few in there, not too many. Maybe I'll add in a few more over on this one instead. A couple of flicks in here. Lovely. Awesome. Let's then go ahead and add in some flowers. So we'll create a new layer. I'm going to probably do all the flowers, to be honest, on one layer. So we'll go to our colors. We've got these really, really saturated colors now. So we're going to grab the middle of the third column, brush, go back to artistic. We're going to go back to the option of Aurora. The brush is going to want to be around about 2% now because it's a fairly small area, isn't it? It's quite far back. And we're going to tap away, adding in our lovely big flowery bush here. I'm pretty confident that this doesn't match up to necessarily real world species, but that's not what really matters. We're just having fun introducing all these lovely bright flowers, this massive flowery cottage, big beautiful front gardens, a couple of specks around this one. So you see how I'm trying to isolate that little shape there? Then I'll leave a gap. You know, we'll bring some of the reds over towards this side now. Definitely up towards this top edge. I want to make sure that we've got a good amount of color on this area here, you know, all the way up to the top. Let's leave this, we'll give it a separate color. We don't want to make the colors too similar. And then create like lumps and bumps. So by adding in another area here of larger shape, you create like a, you know, another part of the bush that's maybe sticking out enough that that gets quite a lot of light, and then therefore there's more flowers on it and it's more colorful. Let's bring these all the way down up towards our little blades. Let's switch to color. Let's go to the top of the third column there. So this is that brighter tone, and you can get in here now and brighten all of those up. You could alpha lock it if you want to, totally up to you. We'll go ahead and add in some yellowy specks. I want this one to look really colorful. I'm going to zoom out just to triple check its kind of density. It's got quite a lot of the red tone, and I want the red tone to sort of be a little bit more subtle than that, because I want it to be almost like the shadowed tone of these colors. I want the yellow to stick in here because I want it to show the light almost landing on the bush here. So just going to introduce a little bit on the right side. Lovely. Let's maybe go back to the red though, the middle of that third column. Just introduce a few more on this right side. I got a little area there. It's not in the light, so that's why it's red. Now I'll switch back to the lighter tone and go along that top edge. Maybe a couple run across a little bit more, and then maybe a few in here as well. You can always come back to these. You can always add more or take away if you want to. Let's just maybe add in a few in behind there. I want this area to look nice and dense. Let's then move across. Let's move into kind of this area here. Let's introduce some pink tones. So we've got the bottom color and this color here. I'm going to grab let's grab this color here first. Sorry, let's grab the purple, bottom of the third column. We'll chuck some purples in here. And in fact, let's go ahead and move this underneath our blades. I want the blades now to sit in front. That kind of gives a better layering effect in my opinion now. So I'll add the blades a little bit behind. I'm going to move into like a purpley tone in this area here. Tapping away with my purples. Lovely. Lots of purple. Get rid of that kind of top edge as well if you can. You know, turn it into like a vibrant looking bush instead. Add in a few in behind there. That'll look lovely. And then let's switch it. Let's switch the color then to the pink in the bottom of the fourth column. And add in some pink on top of those. So these are those ones there that are getting a little bit of light. Maybe it's landing directly on the sunlight, it's cascading onto this bush, and therefore these ones are nice and vibrant. Lovely. And it's kind of like a tapping motion. This last area here, I want to kind of transition that into like these whiter tones. So we're going to grab the middle color there in the fourth column, and we're going to transition it into these kind of a little bit more muted tones. Sometimes you kind of want to sort of tail off the color as things start to drift away. You can just bring the saturation down a little bit, allow then your main focal area to grab all the attention and all the love. A little bit round the back here. Lovely. Just keep that one a little bit more subtle maybe. But I will go to my colors and grab the top color in the fourth column. And then we layer that one on top. So these ones look really, really good together, these two. They just layer on top so nice. The white flowers with the pink. So we'll keep going. Lovely stuff. And then maybe we introduce like the odd little white one that just strays into our little purple area. That will then break down that area. Let's then move into our little area here. Now, this is totally up to you what colours you want to use. You can pick and choose whatever you like. I'm going to go for a mix. I'm going to go for the pink here and the purple and the top here. So I'm going to grab the purple, bottom of the third column. I'm going to add in some flowers in here. So some purples just to lay down like a base colour. Then I'm going to go to the pink, the bottom of the fourth column. Layer that on top, just tapping away. Leave gaps if you want. Cluster some if you like. And then go to your colours and grab the top colour in the fourth column. A little bit white now. Let's bring that size down. Let's bring that down to like a 2 or 1%. Add in lots and lots of specks of these really small flowers. Our homeowner here has purposely put all the little tiny small ones right outside the window. They don't get crammed by the rest of them. Lovely. You've got a lovely little sort of window sill little bay there for those flowers. Now I am going to go ahead and go down though. I'm going to go back down to the green layer. I'm going to go to my colours and grab the colour in the top left of the palette. And then I'm just going to introduce, with the Aurora brush around about 2%, these kind of drag down. So like the plant is just tailing off, falling down, which I think look great. I think it just adds in like a nice, a little bit like untidiness in a sense. But I love this, like when you see them kind of drape down like this. They're really pretty. A little bit along there, and then another one, maybe a small one there. Let's really bulk this one out a little bit more, give that a little bit more size. It's really trailing down a little bit in there. And then I'm just going to go to my greens. I will grab the green in the bottom left of the palette. Small brush size, about 2%, and just wiggle that along a couple of those just to introduce a little bit of highlight on them. Lovely, and then that kind of brings the two together. Of course, we've got our wall mounted ones as well, so we need to go back to our flowery layer. Go to your colours and pick whatever colour that you want to sort of put in there. I think for this one, I'll go for a similar kind of these two colours here. So I'll go to the middle colour in the fourth column. I'll put some, let's maybe set that to 2 or 1%. A couple of flowers in that one. And then the white tone at the top of the fourth column. Again, just trying to add in some on there too. Lovely. Let's do the same. I'm going to do exactly the same colours. The middle of the fourth column. And you can tell by sort of what I'm saying that there's a little bit of like on the spot you can decide what you want to do. You know, depending on how much you've added in of other colours, you may want to change it up. So once I've grabbed that, top of the fourth column, and then I'll just tap away, adding in some lovely little bit of colour on there. Awesome. Now at this point, we probably just need to make a little bit of a sort of a change to the ground here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new layer. I will drag it so it is just above the bushes, but then I'll drag the bushes above. Sometimes if you drag it out of a group, it can get really clumsy. So we'll go to the bottom layer now in this front garden small group. We'll go to our colours, and a lot of these don't really match up to where we are. So we're going to go to our palettes. We're going to go ahead and change it quickly to, let's grab the top palette here, P3. Set that as default. Go back to your disc. We'll go ahead and we will grab this color here. It is the top of the sixth column. I'm going to go to my brush and I'm going to set it to the hearts brush. And I'm going to make the brush probably around about 2 to 3%. I want to get underneath these bushes here, really, really light with my pressure, and just kind of introduce a bit of a shadow onto the ground, like so. Really, really light. Just trying to sort of feed the bushes onto the ground itself. That should just give you a tiny little bit of colour that just looks a little bit more convincing that that does in fact live where it's meant to. Zooming out. Lovely. Now, of course, these steps here look a little bit funny. We need to probably fix them, which actually leads us nicely into the fact that we are now going to move into the actual cottage itself. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to collapse our plants down. Hopefully you're still okay with your layers. We're going to go to our cottage. We're going to open it up. And before we get started on anything like the steps, we want to add in general highlights and shadows to our cottage. Let's start with the white area. So we're going to create a new layer and tap on it and clipping mask it to it. And then because it's on its own, you've got the roof here on a separate layer, which we sorted out earlier. We can keep things nice and tidy. So on this layer, we're going to go to our colors. We need to change our palette. We're going to go back to our palettes. We're going to go to Cottage P1 and set that as default. We're going to go to our disc. We're going to go ahead and grab the middle color in the first column. Now for me, I'm going to go ahead and use the inking or drawing, was it? No, inking, sorry. It was the ink roller brush. If you don't like this brush from previous attempts with like the steps at the bottom there, the tiles, you can go ahead and change it if you want to. Use something maybe like the soft airbrush, but I like the streaky effect that this gives. So for example, I've got the brush size set to 16%. I'm going to go down here, introduce that shadow that needs to sit under here, and then I'm just going to bring that across a tiny bit like so. We're going to bring in a little bit of a shadow under here, just a tiny one, and then we want to start to factor in small elements of shadow. So about 6%, I'm going to go underneath the windowsill here, make sure that that's nice and dark, maybe a little bit on the kind of recess of the window. So just go up and down that a couple of times. If your angle of your brush isn't quite working how you want it to, just rotate your canvas. Let's make sure in here is nice and dark though, so it's got a good solid amount of this blue. I'm just going to bring that in like so. I'm then going to go ahead and bring the size down to about 3% because we need to get behind some of these wooden beams. So I'm going to bring that right down to a 2% brush size now and just get behind some of these beams, which I need to just make sure I do it again, but with a quick enough pace that it doesn't look too stuttery, or I just need to go up and down it a couple of times, either. A little bit on the underside of there. We'll definitely add some on the underside as well. So let's do a slightly larger 2%. Go underneath there, lovely. A little one under there. And this one would have a little bit on the top edge, and maybe even a little bit in there too. Lovely, so some basic shadows getting put into play now. We're going to zoom in. Down here on the right hand side, we want to make sure we push our brush this way so we get the angle right. And we're just going to go left to right and just kind of smudge this all in together and just create like a real shaded side of our cabin. Now I want to leave the occasional little sort of streak. That's what I'm looking for. That just gives us a little bit more of a sort of unevenness to the cottage's kind of style and aesthetic. I've got it set to 10% now. We want to go ahead and go underneath the roof. So it's going to create a shadow coming underneath. You're going to slowly start to see your design come together. We'll go to 16% and maybe just very lightly just run some lines horizontally. Zoom in here. Look, this is what we want. We want these additional layers of color. So we're going to make sure it's definitely nice and blue under there, but then the shadow just drags down a little bit more than you probably think it should, like so. Then we'll bring the brush size down to 8%. Let's get behind these bushes. They would cast shadows up onto the wall. You can have it nice and streaky, nice and wobbly almost, so that the shadow's not nice and solid. Let's go down then the door, a little bit down the door there as well. Go around that. And looking at the rest of the wall, we can just lightly just go left to right here. We can always go back over later on with the actual white color of the actual property. Let's go in behind some of these bushes here, the shadow that they cast up onto the wall, a little something like that. Definitely over here as well, a little shadow on the wall. This all ties nicely together now. Bring the brush size down to 4% and just go down that column and along this one here. We're going to go underneath the sills here, underneath like so. Let's go down this edge of the window, down that edge as well, just making sure that that's also done. We'll add some in behind these very small areas of plants, and maybe you need to bring your brush size down to like a 2% and just do a couple of wiggles in here just to show it on the surface of the outside area of the building. Lovely. Get underneath that sill nice and tight. You can see sometimes they don't always go edge to edge, also they're a little bit uneven. I like that. Awesome. Look at how much it's come together already. You can really get a sense for the highlights and shadows, the darkness of it's just buried in here. Let's then take that up a notch. We're going to go ahead and introduce a couple of other tones. We are going to grab this color here, the bottom of that's the bottom of the first column. Brush size set to around about 8%. I want to go ahead and just kind of streak this through the blue almost, giving it a little bit more of a kind of mix of colors. So we've got a little bit of that warm tone up in there. Likewise here, I just want to kind of just run it underneath the roof a little bit and streak that down. It's really, really light, but I want to mix the blue with this color. So it's kind of a streaky effect that we're going for. Layering this on top of each other, it just gives hopefully a little bit more warmth to it and matches up a little bit more to the outside aesthetic of the building. Then we're going to get really dark with the shadows. So I recommend we create a second layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. Let's go to our colors. Let's go ahead and grab a nice dark tone, and I think we can get away with the top here of the third column. We're going to do exactly the same. We're going to kind of put it in the same spots as well. We're going to come down this edge here, introducing our main dark shadow here, letting that run across, just introducing that real darkness up in there. It's going to look a bit odd for a minute because we haven't done the roof yet, so just trust the process for the moment. Underside of the roof here, you can press really light or you can press really firm. Either way, you can just lower the opacity down in a minute. This right side over here, we're going to go a bit of an angle and just go all the way down it a couple of times to introduce the shadowed side of the building. So that can go all the way up to this column. So we can just push out from the column as well. Gives us a nice boundary to work up against. Lovely. Now we put it on a separate layer because if you want to, you can tap on it and just maybe bring the opacity down just a smidge, maybe down to say 85% if you've pressed a little bit firmer like I have. Another thing we want to do while we're on that layer is go ahead and set the brush to 4% and just get in behind some of these columns here. So a little bit on this right side here. And that all looks fine. That looks fine too. Maybe just a tiny bit in there, in this little triangle. Lovely. Other than that, that looks pretty good to me. Let's then move into the roof and add some highlights and shadows to that as well. We'll do the chimney at a later point. Now, the brush again, I'm still using the same brush. I love the aesthetic of it, but if it's something that you find tricky, please change it to something else. I'm going to create a new layer and tap on it and clip it to the roof here. I'm going to go to my colors and we're going to go ahead and grab a bit of a darker tone for the roof. We're going to grab the middle color here in the third column. Same brush as before. Got it set to about 10%. We're going to go down this side here like so. And if you get any of these lovely streaks, I think they look great because I think they add more to the texture of the roof. So you end up with a little bit like so. There's a guideline here of, if I turn this off, you can see there's a guideline here of our stencil. If I turn that back on, you can see we're going up to that line only. What we then want to do is start to factor in sort of basic areas of shadow. So I've gone down to 5% here because I'm going to come down this line here. I'm going to bring that down here. So this is like the underside of this kind of archway here. We can then go ahead and kind of just bring in a bit of a shadow running across here. So you can kind of streak that in then horizontally once you've laid out like a bit of a line. Now, don't forget, being a thatched roof, all the lines are flowing down in a certain direction like this. So we kind of want to somewhat focus our lines like that. Here at the top, over this curved little bit here, we're going to go ahead and streak this in and then flatten that out towards the rest of the roof like so. And we're going to bring that shadow down because it would block all of it. And we're going to roll it over the top, light pressure. We will trim that down in a second, but that's kind of our basic area. And we're going to bring that down up towards this line here of our other main point. Let's then also go ahead and darken up around the window here. So like the underside of this curve here. I'm going to come down the underside of here as well. Just a little bit of a curve and a little bit of a flick off as well to kind of show that dark shadow there like so. Another area that we need to add some texture to, about 7% now, on the edge here. I want you to kind of try and just find it where it's horizontal and kind of create this somewhat diagonal. I want you to kind of aim it this way a little bit. So we're kind of pushing it this way. There we go. So we can create the underside of the roof as it rolls round. Turn off your guide if you need to, like I'm going to, just so I can see that line, the actual edge of the roof a little bit more. I'm just creating all these little dashes along here just to create some texture. Now again, that little underside where it just starts to roll under itself. Then when you get to this column here, you need to flick it the other way and angle it in towards the left-hand side, so down to the left. And there we go. It rolls around into the shadows. We don't need to worry about that. Look how much it's already coming together. I love these stages. Now on the same layer, we can go ahead and go to the top color here, top of the second column there, we can introduce a little bit of a darker tone. You want to be really sparing with this. You want to kind of come down here, darken this up a lot more on the underside there. Let's then bring the brush down to about 2% and then maybe dash in and go along here a little bit. And again, bring that shadow all the way down, just darkening that up a little bit more. The underside of our arch, we can go ahead and go this side here, wrap that up and around, kind of just fill in this corner a little bit and a little bit underneath as well. Lovely. It's a little bit of extra darker tone. What we can also do is just go along the edge here as well, just along the edge, that underside, and just kind of very, very lightly, just kind of block it in almost, you know, block in that underside of the roof. Oh, that's lovely. Go along here too. And I don't really want to add any up here too much, maybe like a streak or two in here, so like a 5 or 6%, like a couple of streaks in here to kind of again show the flow of the roof lining, etc. A little something like this, just to again add in a little bit of variation in the tone. And then up here we'll do the same, maybe a little bit of variation in here too. Now I mentioned about tidying this up because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go to our eraser, tap on it. We're going to go to our airbrush and use the soft brush. Set the size to about sort of 4% and just fade this out. Just this top area needs to be really, really faint. There we go. And just as it rolls its way over the top like so. Now the next step, I know it's going to look really messy, but trust the process, I promise. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it and clip it to the roof as well. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush. We're going to go into the option of, it's organic. The bamboo brush is what we're going to use. We're going to go ahead and go to a couple of different colors and try and just really add in some variation to this roof area. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the first sort of dark tone, which I want to set to this one here, the middle of the second column. Got the brush set to 13%. All you need to do is very, very lightly with your pressure, show me the sort of flow of the roof with lots of streaks like this. We're going to streak on color after color after color. So hopefully you'll be able to break down some of these dark lines. We're just trying to scribble in some variation in what would be the roof lining here. We're going to come through the shadowed area up and over the top here and then try and kind of identify that shape a little bit more. Also kind of show this curve here that's going to be right up on the top. So you're going to come down towards this like curve shape here. Let's go down. Let's maybe try and add in a few down here. Little something like this. And then here at the front, we kind of want to pivot the lines. They kind of want to go like this. And then over here on the right, they kind of move around to the right a little bit. So we're going to keep going. Just keep adding in streak after streak. These are all the random bumps and lumps of the roof. I love a thatched roof. Usually it's a lot neater than this though in terms of the professional's work. But I'm trying to exaggerate that a tiny bit. Trying to introduce kind of texture in here. Lovely. And oh, love it. Love it. It's coming together nicely. All these small little things that you just slowly build up. You add to the property and you add to the overall sort of scene. Looks awesome. Let's keep going. Let's just add in a few along there too. And then not only do we add dark tones, we also add lighter tones as well as the base tone as well. So we can grab the lighter tone bottom of the third column and we repeat. We run this through now in exactly the same fashion. You can go over the top of some of your dark tones. You can do whatever you want. Keep the light maybe towards the sort of top edge. And then here, this is kind of important. We want to go down here a little bit and then just sort of swoop down. So you want to introduce like a big block here just to kind of show this curving nature to the roof. You know, you can even draw it in if you want to actually just create like a bit of a curve under there. I might undo that and just do it a little bit more subtle. There we go. And then introducing some more tone in here. Go right down towards the bottom as well if you want to. Up here, we definitely need to introduce this tone. So we come down the top of this arch. We come down here, highlighting basically the edge of it, and then how it flows back into the rest of the roof. At the very top, we can introduce some streaks. Now, I know they just look like little dashes, little scrapes, but it goes towards building up the entire scene, the entire texture of this roof. Sometimes it really isn't that complicated, or it shouldn't be that complicated of what you're adding in. It can be as simple as something like this, lots of little scrapes and dashes. So now we've added in some of the highlight tones. Let's go ahead and actually just emphasize the actual general highlights as well. So we'll create a new layer. We'll go ahead and we'll go to our colors, making sure it is the bottom here of the third column. Let's switch our brush and we're going to go back into the option of inking and ink roll. I'm going to set the size to about 10%. And I'm just going to lightly kind of just towards the top edge here, highlight this area of the roof, showing where the lighting's coming in. I'm going to maybe try and introduce like a little bit that wraps down here, underside of that. We need to introduce a bit more of a shadow there, really, drag that down a bit more. Here at the top, we'll introduce some lighting, but obviously then the shadow takes over. I just need to emphasize this area here so that we create that curve in the roof. And let's even bring that size down to like a 5% and maybe just kind of make our way through it. Just trying to round off the shadow. We've somewhat already highlighted this edge here of this arch, but you may need to do it again, and you may want to just introduce like a little bit on the inside here. Now you may want to do a little bit on the inside here. Now if I actually go to my layer, it wasn't clipped. Make sure it is clipped to the roof, just in case you haven't done that either. And then that way we can just go down this inside here, brightening that up without affecting the rest of it. And we can just maybe wiggle our pen along here. General just highlights to the roof. Likewise then, we're also going to further the shadows a little bit more as well. So we're going to go back to the shadow layer here at the bottom. We're going to go back to our colors and we're going to grab the tone. Let's grab the middle color here in the second column. Same brush, 9%. I'm just going to go ahead and just go down this edge, rounding off the building, hopefully a little bit on that underside here, maybe a little bit more of a shadow in here. And we can really darken up the bottom edge as well. You can now start to build up the shadows a bit more at that bottom edge, darken that up. Let's get underneath here as well and try and create like that divot, the cut into the roof line here, like it's an indent almost, and just peel that off to the right. Let's go along this edge here, backwards and forwards along the edge, adding a bit of rounding to it. Definitely need a bit more rounding in here and along this edge here, darkening that up. A couple of squiggles, that's all it needs to be. And then let's add some variation in the roof. So let's maybe try and bring some of the shadows up a tiny bit. Yes, we can leave where our highlights are, but we can bring the dark tone up from the bottom to meet the area here where the sun is bathing onto the roof. So that area there's probably a bit too dark, so I'm just going to squiggle that in again. So we're underneath all those lines. They maintain the structure of the roof and the sort of flow of everything. But we're now just darkening it up, giving that lovely cottagey dark tone, like the roof's aged, of course. And then the top is nice and sunny. So I'm just squiggling my pen along here. I'm going to leave that area, that's fine. Again, inside of that window, lovely stuff. The next thing we can do is we can go ahead and add tiny amounts of sort of glimmer to the windows. So we can go back to the layer here for the glass. We can go ahead and tap on that layer and alpha lock it, save yourself some layers. We can go to our colors. We can go ahead and grab the bottom color in the third column. Let's go to our brush and change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. And let's bring the size right down to 5%. And just at the bottom here, very lightly, super light in the glass. You can see that's all I added. I'm going to leave that window completely. I'm going to brighten up the right hand side here of this glass here, just a little something on there. Let's then go to our wood. So we're going to go up to our wood layer. I'm going to go ahead and tap on it and I'm going to alpha lock it for a minute. I'm going to go to my colors and we are going to look for this color here, top of the fifth column. We're going to introduce some wood-like tones, of course. So we're going to set the brush size to around about 3%. And what we want to do is we want to find areas that we think are going to get some lighting. So the bottom area of this column up to around about here. I imagine the roof will block the light from about there. So I can bring that in like so. I want to go ahead and introduce some light on this sill. So the top of here, a little bit of brown, lovely. Little tiny bit on the end there. I think this sill up here, maybe just the tiniest streak of brown. Nothing too heavy. Here we've got some shadows that come across, so maybe we just introduce a bit of brown over towards the right hand side. Up here at the top, we can introduce some brown on the face of these so we can come across them. We can go down. We can go down into like this central point, but that's about it really. We can't add any in this top areas because they're in the shadows. Under here, maybe the tiniest bit of brown on there, and the tiniest little bit over here on this column and the underside of this one. The rest is very much in the shadows. We can then also go ahead and go to our colors. We can grab the color here at the bottom of the second column. If we go to our brush, we change it to the option of inking and we go dry ink this time. Again, with that 3% brush size, you might just be able to introduce some really subtle line work in here just to show some wood. So really subtle on there, really subtle on here too. So a couple of streaks through here. That's it really on this left side. A little bit on the underside of there. Keeping it simple. The wood up here on the sill, maybe we can introduce some lines running through here just to show some woody kind of grain to it. Likewise up here, we'll introduce some texture running through there, a little bit down here too. A little bit here, focusing it in those light brown areas that you introduced the highlights to, so that there's obvious reason why it would be highlighted. Again, down here, introduce some wood. That's a little bit too big, I think. We'll introduce the tiniest little streak. Back here is so small that we're not going to get too much detail. Along that top area of the sill maybe, like here. Oh, that's lovely. That's looking pretty cool. I'm happy with that. Now, of course, at this point, you're probably like, Joel, when are we going to get to the door? Well, we're going to do that now. So we're going to go ahead and go to the wood layer. We're going to go to our selection tool and we're going to make a freehand. Make sure color fill is turned off. Freehand selection around your door here. So your door shape, and tap on the dot. Go to copy paste. Go to your layers. You should now see this extra door here. We can go ahead and go to our colors and grab the middle color here in the second column, drag it into there, grab your cursor, use uniform and scale it down in size if you can, leaving the right hand side almost touching this right side. And then that way you give a little bit of an indent to the door on the left and top edge. So I can move that up just the tiniest bit until at the bottom I see it's not touching anymore. There we go. So that gives you a little bit of an indent. And now we can add some wood kind of paneling here. So we can go to the layer, we can tap on it and add a mask because the layer underneath will then act as the shadows. Now we're going to go to our actions, we're going to go to canvas and drawing guide. We're going to turn that on. It should be by default a 2D grid. Hit done, then go to your layer, tap on it and make sure it's using the drawing assist. So you tap on it and use drawing assist. We go to our brush, change it to the option of, we could use the dry ink to be fair. We could go to our colors and double tap at the bottom of the disc to select black. Let's go to our mask, making sure you're on the mask and your brush size is set to about 3%. What you then want to do is start drawing in straight lines. You won't be able to draw anything that isn't either vertical or horizontal because of the drawing guide. So now you can go ahead and introduce these wooden kind of slats to the door, and you can have them as varied sort of shapes in terms of your brush strokes. Some of them can be a little bit more tilted on their side if you wish, but as long as the gaps are somewhat sort of even between them, you'll end up with a really nice wooden door frame. And at this point you can also go ahead and maybe just add in really dark lines between, but then also some kind of woody like kind of grains like this, so light streaks up and down the door frame. Give you some nice color to play with in a moment. Lovely, really light to the door. Lovely, couple more up and down here too. Up towards the very top, we'll probably add in a few more at the top edge here just to kind of almost introduce a shadow. So we can tip our pen on its side and probably shade underneath there as well. So then just triple checking, when we zoom out, it looks good. Perfect. Let's go ahead and turn off our drawing guide because we're done with that. We don't need that on anymore. We then want to go ahead and go to our layer, create a new layer and tap on it and clip it to the new door selection. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the bottom color in the second column. Go to your brush, airbrushing and the soft brush, and let's go ahead and set the brush size to around about, say, let's go to about sort of 5%. First of all, start off by just creating like a general sort of diagonal line across here just to show some lighting, maybe brighter in the bottom right area, but just a general kind of highlight like this on the door. Look how cool that looks. Let's add a couple of details though to the door. Let's go ahead and create a new layer in front. Let's go to our colors and let's grab the dark tone here, top of the second column. Let's go to our brush and go to inking, dry ink, 3% brush size. We'll zoom in and let's go ahead and introduce like some sort of like metal kind of door, handle of sorts. So I'm just going to create like a bit of a rectangle here on the door. So a little something like this. And to be honest, I think that's all you kind of need. You don't really need much more than that, just to sort of show the fact that there's some sort of handle there, maybe even like something a little bit hanging down. Like we can decide what kind of handle it is, of course. Maybe you even want to zoom in. We can grab, say, for example, this color here, bottom left of the palette, and then maybe you can go ahead and sort of identify maybe like the handle here and maybe the outer edge of this kind of really unique metal kind of designed door handle of some sort. That looks fine to me. That looks lovely. And we'll introduce like a very small little window up here. So we'll go to our colors. We'll grab the top color here in the second column. So just kind of on the same layer, that's perfectly fine. We're just going to introduce a bit of a window here, very, very small one, like a little hatch window. I'll come across here, up here, link that up at the top. There we go. We've got our little frame here. And because we've done a good job at the frame and actually darkening up this left side a tiny bit more, so we end up with that 3D indent, what we'll do is we'll go to our layers. We'll create a new layer and drag it underneath, just so that we can keep that frame there. It's always going to be present. We can go ahead and go to our colors and we can grab the middle color here in the third column. Brush. Let's just set it to airbrushing in the medium brush, because if we set the opacity to max and we set the size to about 1%, we should be able to just fill in this area here, like so. And then that will give us our window. Now, we have this line running through, which is part of the mask down here. So if we go to the mask, we go to our color, we double tap in the top left to select white, we can now fill that back in and get rid of that line running through our little window there on the top. Lovely. Now what we can also go ahead and do is if we go to that window, we can go ahead and add in some texture on there too, and maybe even some very loose reflections. So if we go to our colors, we go ahead and grab, say, this color here, top of the fourth column from the right. We can go to our brush, the medium brush again. Again, let's keep it at 1%. And we can just maybe sort of tap on the layer. Let's alpha lock it first. We can then go ahead and sort of tap in here and just kind of allude to a few of the kind of bushes maybe that potentially that's reflecting over here. So we're just going to add in a little bit of texture on there, maybe a little bit more green. So let's grab the bottom of the fourth column from the right and maybe a couple of very, very loose blurry reflections in here. That's just enough. And then once we've done that, we can then add some metal framing to this. So top of the second column there, brush, inking, dry ink, and let's maybe just add in like the center point here, and then maybe some horizontal lines. Now I know we got rid of that, so maybe in fact we'll change it from the grain. This may be different for you. I'm going to introduce 2 vertical lines so that I don't continue that line on, and then I'll just do some like little horizontal ones here as well. Maybe I'll thicken these up as well, these vertical ones. And if we zoom out, you should end up with a really cool window, and it should just give you that illusion of a reflection. Now the front area here, somewhat you could leave because it looks like just a piece of stone, but to me I don't really like it. So I'm going to go ahead and go in front of the layers that I've just working with in the cottage group, a new layer right at the top. I'm going to go to my color and grab the top of the second column. Brush wants to be set to calligraphy and the monoline brush. If we set it to about 5%, we can just go ahead and draw in like a couple areas of stone here. So let's go ahead and draw in like a vertical line there. So that's one. I'm just going around drawing a rectangle so I can drag and drop the color in. Let's make sure we actually do that. And then do another step here. And then that goes all the way to the path. And then that way I can just kind of block that in. I've got all the shape I need now. I've got a good idea of what I'm looking at. So I can just chuck all that behind those plants. I can then go to my colors. I can let's grab this color here. Let's grab the bottom of the first column. Let's go to our brush and go to inking and the dry ink. And if we go to the layer and we tap on it and we just alpha lock it, we don't need to do anything too sort of detailed to it. All we need to do is just kind of add in a little bit of lighting. So I've got it set to 3%. That should be enough as long as I point my pen down enough. You can create the top ledge here, another top ledge of the stone here. Zooming out, that might be a little bit too bright still in this area. So maybe tip your pen on its side with a 6% brush size and just run the grey through here, toning down some of that dark tone, making it look a little bit more stone-like as well. Zooming out, you should end up with 2 little steps like this. I love it when simple things like that just come together. That's why you can probably hear me kind of laughing about it, because that grain with the dry ink on its side is enough to give you 2 little stone-like steps just in front of your cottage. Now, of course, we cannot finish without doing our chimney. Really simple to do. We're just going to go to our chimney. We're going to go down here to these 2 layers that we created here for the base kind of, if I turn them on and off, the shadows in the white area. So we're on this layer still. We don't need to create any new ones. We're just going to go to our colors, grab the middle color in the first column, brush. Let's set it back to the option of the ink roll brush. Let's set the size to about 16%. Let's go down. That's way too big, sorry. Let's go to 6%. Let's go down here. And then let's bring that in. So maybe you need to bring in your guide again. So let's just turn that on. That should just give you an idea for the side profile. You can just about see it. So let's just bring in like the side profile here. I'm going to set the brush size to something really small, around 2%, and just create a side profile for this additional top area here that I created. And again, another one for the very tip of the chimney as well, leaving like a little bit of the kind of white in between. That should then give you the basics of your shadows. Now, of course, the roof itself is blocking some light, so we're going to run a line straight across here. There we go. Darkening that up, and then you can kind of fade it a bit if you want to. And then all we're going to do, set the brush size to about 2%. Let's turn off our guide. I don't need that on at this point, so let's turn that off. I'm going to go ahead and just run a line across there to kind of separate these shapes. You can see them. They now have nice separation. Run in some lines here, different pressures, different weights, because I want to introduce like kind of brick-like lines in here. So just running my pen down at different angles, different pressures. I'll get different sort of amounts of actual contact on the screen. You can see there, that one there is way too much. I can just darken up the edge though. I can add in some horizontal lines up here too, and you know, maybe we just leave the very top nice and white. Let's then go ahead and go to our colors, and we will grab then the next tone, the bottom of the first column, sorry. You can tell I'm losing my mind now because we're getting so far into this. Just going to introduce in the white areas a couple more areas of like this gray tone. So through the bricks like so, we can introduce some grays in here up to this edge. We can separate those shapes a little bit more as well if you want to, you know, using a bit of this kind of grayish tone. Just adding in some detail up there. And then let's go ahead and darken them up a lot more as well. So we're going to have to grab this color here, or even the top one. Let's grab the middle first of all, middle of the third column. Again, where that highlight comes, the shadow comes across, we just darken this up quite a bit. Now, before we do that, we kind of need to say, right, well, this side over here is really in the shadows, so we need to really darken this up now. So we're going to come down this side profile. Maybe you get a streak of the blue stay in there, and that's why I love this brush so much at the minute. Let's go across here then, introducing that shadow as we mentioned, so the building blocks off all of the light, but maybe you get a little bit of the blue come through. Lovely. And you've got your little chimney. I don't think, to be honest, you need to add in too much more than that. The only thing you could do is go to your colors and grab the white tone, top of the first column, small brush size around about 2%, and then just carry on the bricks almost on the opposite side in the similar kind of aesthetic to the left side. So you just carry in on the bricks, kind of showing, yeah, it's in the shadow. Yeah, we know. But we can go ahead and just introduce edges that we can see of some brickwork here. Because yes, it's in the shadow, but that doesn't mean it's completely pitch black, especially not during the day like this. You know, you will get a little bit of detail here and there. And likewise in your shadows down here, we can just introduce a couple of horizontal lines and then a couple of vertical lines, keeping it really very, very light with your pressure. That is enough then to give you a few of those brick-like areas. Now, taking a look at the finished result, I'm really happy with it and I'm very tired. So I'm going to leave it as it is. Maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll make some adjustments. But if I pinch with 2 fingers and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram by tagging me in them. And you can also share your designs with the community that I have over on Discord. Both will be linked in the description down below. And a massive shout out to all of my supporters over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month over on my Patreon to Patreon supporters, and the catalogue just continues to grow. So be sure to hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support, have your name featured in videos, get early access to videos, sneak peeks and much more. Again, the link will be in the description down below. And if you like this video, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. So thank you so much for watching, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.